May 23, 1945. A British interrogation room. A captured German soldier bites down on a cyanide capsule and dies within seconds. The officers rush to save him because they've just realized who he really is. Heinrich Himmler, the man who organized the murder of 11 million people, has just cheated justice. But here's the disturbing part. Himmler wasn't a raging psychopath. He was a failed chicken farmer who vomited when he witnessed executions. He wore glasses, kept meticulous records, and went home to his wife every night. Yet, this ordinary bureaucrat built the most efficient killing machine in human history and managed it like a business, complete with spreadsheets and quarterly reports. The architect of the Holocaust was essentially a middle manager with a briefcase. And that's what makes him terrifying. Because if someone that normal could orchestrate the deaths of millions, what does that say about any of us? This is his complete story, from beginning to end. And it's going to show you exactly how an entire system of industrialized murder came into existence. Chapter 1. The Making of a Fanatic, 1900 to 1923. Munich, October 7, 1900. In a modest apartment on the Hildegardstrasse, a boy enters the world who will one day command an empire built on human ash. But on this autumn morning, there's no hint of what's coming. Just a baby crying, a mother exhausted, and a father already planning the rigid path his second son will walk. Gebhard Himmler, schoolteacher and former tutor to Bavarian royalty, holds his newborn and sees only potential for obedience, discipline, and success. He names him Heinrich. The Himmler household operates like a military barracks, disguised as a home. Every hour accounted for, every action scrutinized, every emotion cataloged in diaries that Gebhard forces his sons to keep, checking them nightly for signs of weakness or deviation. Young Heinrich learns early that love comes with conditions, that approval must be earned through perfect behavior, and that the world divides neatly into those who follow rules and those who deserve contempt. His father's voice echoes through childhood like a drill sergeant's cadence. Posture, penmanship, punctuality. The boy internalizes it all, his spine straightening under the weight of impossible expectations. By age 10, Heinrich is writing in his diary with obsessive precision. Not just what he did, but what he ate, who he spoke to, how many minutes he studied, whether his bowels moved properly. The pages reveal a mind that cannot rest, that seeks control over every variable of existence, because chaos feels like death. Other boys play. Heinrich records. Other boys rebel. Heinrich complies. But beneath the obedience, something else grows. A desperate need to prove himself worthy, to demonstrate value, to earn the validation his father rations like wartime bread. When the Great War erupts in August 1914, Heinrich is barely 14 years old, watching from his bedroom window as columns of young men march through Munich streets toward trains that will carry them to glory or graves. The city pulses with martial fever. Bands play. Women weep and wave handkerchiefs. The air smells of brass polish and anticipation. Heinrich's heart hammers against his ribs. This is it. This is how a man proves himself. His older brother Gebhard joins a Bavarian regiment and writes letters home describing the thunder of artillery, the brotherhood of the trenches, the purpose that comes from serving something greater than yourself. Heinrich devours every word, desperate to follow. He begs his father. He writes applications. He pulls every string the Himmler name can reach, leveraging Gebhard Sr.'s connections to Bavarian nobility. Finally, in January 1918, just months before the war's end, Heinrich gets his wish. He's accepted as an officer cadet in the 11th Infantry Regiment. 17 years old, weak-chinned and myopic behind round spectacles, convinced he's about to become a hero. He reports for training, imagining himself leading charges across no man's land, earning medals, returning home transformed into the man his father always wanted. But the war has other plans. Heinrich spends his months in training, drilling endlessly, learning to march and salute while the Western Front collapses like a punctured lung. The great German armies that once seemed invincible are retreating. Men are deserting. The Spanish flu sweeps through barracks. killing more soldiers than artillery. Heinrich gets sick. His stomach troubles begin, the chronic digestive problems that will plague him forever, as if his body is rejecting the very idea of combat. He never hears a shot fired in anger, never sees an enemy soldier, never gets closer to the front than a training ground in Bavaria. November 1918 arrives like a slap across the face. Germany surrenders. The Kaiser abdicates and flees to Holland. Revolutionary councils seize control of Munich. Armed workers patrol the streets. Red flags hang from buildings where imperial eagles once perched. Heinrich, still in his cadet uniform, watches his entire world collapse. Everything his father taught him about German superiority, about military honor, about the natural order of things, suddenly seems like a cruel lie. He hasn't even graduated from officer training, and already the war is over, his chance for glory stolen by politicians who stabbed the army in the back. At least that's how it feels. That's how it will always feel. The bitterness settles into his bones like winter cold. He's demobilized without ever being mobilized. Returns home not as a conquering hero, but as another failed cadet in a defeated nation. Munich is unrecognizable. Socialists and communists battle in the streets. The brief Bavarian Soviet Republic rises and falls in blood and chaos. Government troops execute revolutionaries against brick walls. The smell of cordite and decay hangs over the city. Heinrich watches it all with growing rage, convinced that Germany has been betrayed from within, that Jews and Marxists and traitors have destroyed everything pure and strong about the fatherland. He enrolls at the Technical University of Munich to study agriculture, but his real education happens elsewhere, in beer halls, in folkish meetings, in gatherings of bitter veterans and angry young men who refuse to accept that Germany lost the war fairly. The folkish movement offers a complete worldview, a lens through which everything suddenly makes sense. Germany didn't lose because the Allies were stronger. Germany lost because of racial contamination, because Jews weakened the national body from within, because Slavic and Latin elements corrupted pure Germanic blood. It's pseudoscience wrapped in mythology, racism dressed up as anthropology, but to Heinrich it feels like revelation. He devours the literature, reads about ancient Germanic tribes, about Aryan racial superiority, about blood and soil and the cosmic struggle between races. His diaries fill with anti-Semitic observations. He notes which professors might be Jewish, comments on the shape of noses, the sound of names, attends lectures by men who claim to have scientific proof that races are locked in eternal competition, and only the racially pure will survive. This isn't just prejudice. This is a complete system of meaning, a way to understand why everything went wrong and how to make it right again. Heinrich completes his agriculture degree in 1922, gets a job working at a fertilizer company, spends his days analyzing soil samples and calculating crop yields while his mind churns with grand theories about race and destiny. He's 22 years old, living with his parents, working a dead-end job, his body weak and his stomach constantly rebelling. By any measure, he's unremarkable. A failed soldier, a mediocre student, a man with no prospects and less charisma. But inside, the rage and resentment are building pressure like a boiler about to explode. Then, in 1923, someone tells him about a movement, a party, led by an Austrian corporal named Adolf Hitler, who speaks about Germany's betrayal with such fury that grown men weep. Heinrich attends a meeting, stands in the back of a crowded Munich beer hall, watching this strange little man with the Charlie Chaplin mustache work the crowd into frenzy. Hitler speaks for nearly 2 hours without notes, his voice rising and falling like a conductor leading an orchestra, and Heinrich feels something he's never felt before. Purpose, belonging, the sense that his anger isn't madness but clarity, that his obsessions aren't weakness but strength waiting to be unleashed. He joins the Nazi Party in August 1923, becoming member number 1423. It's a fringe movement, considered extreme even by the standards of Weimar Germany's chaotic political scene. Most people dismiss them as cranks and thugs. But Heinrich sees something different. He sees order, hierarchy, a clear racial ideology. A Führer who demands absolute obedience and offers absolute certainty in return. Everything his father taught him about discipline, everything the folkish movement taught him about race, everything his own bitterness taught him about who to blame, it all crystallizes into this moment. He throws himself into party activities with typical obsessiveness, attends every meeting, distributes propaganda, participates in the paramilitary exercises where SA brown shirts practice for the revolution they're convinced is coming. Heinrich isn't physically imposing. He can't fight worth a damn, but he can organize. He can keep records. He can follow orders and ensure others do the same. These skills matter more than muscle. November 8, 1923. Hitler decides the moment has arrived. The Beer Hall Putsch, an attempted coup d'état starting from Munich Beer Hall, meant to overthrow the Bavarian government and march on Berlin. Heinrich participates, standing with other Nazi faithful as Hitler takes control of a meeting at the Burgerbraukeller, declaring a national revolution. For one intoxicating night, it seems possible. They have weapons. They have will. They have righteous anger. Then morning comes. Government troops and police block their path. Gunfire erupts at the Feldherrnhall. 16 Nazis die. Hitler's shoulder is dislocated as his bodyguard takes a bullet. The coup collapses in chaos. Hitler is arrested. The Nazi party is banned. Heinrich, standing at the edges of the failed revolution, watches his newfound purpose dissolve into another defeat. But this time, something's different. This time, the bitterness doesn't turn inward. Heinrich has found his calling, found his tribe, found the man he will follow into the abyss. The party may be banned, but the idea survives. Hitler will be released. The movement will rebuild. And Heinrich Himmler, failed soldier and mediocre agronomist, will be there when it rises again, ready to prove that even the weak can wield terrible power if they're willing to embrace their hatred completely. The question isn't whether he'll get his chance. The question is what he'll do with it when the time comes. Chapter 2. Rise through the ranks, 1925 to 1929. The prison gates of Landsberg Fortress swing open on December 20th, 1924, and Adolf Hitler walks free after serving just 9 months of a 5-year sentence for treason. He emerges not broken, but transformed, carrying the manuscript of Mein Kampf under his arm and a new strategy in his mind. No more beer hall coups. No more armed rebellions. This time, they'll take power legally, exploiting the very democratic system they intend to destroy. Heinrich Himmler watches from the sidelines, waiting for his invitation back into the fold, his loyalty as patient and persistent as rust eating through iron. The Nazi Party officially reconstitutes on February 27, 1925. Himmler rejoins immediately, drawn back like a moth to flame, unable to imagine any other path for his life. But the movement has changed. It's smaller now, more disciplined, purged of the opportunists who scattered when the coup failed. Hitler has learned that revolution requires organization, not just rage. He needs administrators, not just agitators. Men who can build structures, maintain files, enforce rules. Men like Heinrich Himmler, whose obsessive personality and bureaucratic mind finally find their perfect application. Himmler's early assignments are unglamorous. He works as a secretary, files paperwork, organizes meetings in Lower Bavaria, where the party is rebuilding its networks among farmers and small-town nationalists. He rides his motorcycle from village to village, often sleeping in barns, eating whatever food sympathizers offer, his stomach constantly churning with pain, but his determination never wavering. Other men might see this as humiliation, this reduction from revolutionary to rural organizer. Heinrich sees it as apprenticeship. Every small task completed perfectly. Every detail recorded meticulously. Every order followed without question. He's building a reputation for absolute reliability. In July 1926, something happens that will define the rest of his existence. Hitler creates a new position within the party structure. The Schutzstaffel, the Protection Squadron, abbreviated as SS. It's meant to be Hitler's personal bodyguard, separate from the rowdy SA brown shirts who were proving difficult to control. The SS starts with just 8 men, all handpicked for loyalty above all else. They wear black caps with skull insignia, borrowed from Imperial German cavalry units. They take oaths swearing absolute obedience to Hitler personally, not to the party or the nation, but to one man. This concept of personal loyalty fascinates Heinrich. Here is hierarchy made flesh. Here is order elevated to religion. He maneuvers for position within this new organization, leveraging every contact, pressing his case with characteristic persistence. In September 1927, he's appointed deputy to the SS commander, a man named Erhard Heiden, who leads the organization but lacks vision for what it could become. Heinrich, now 27 years old, finally has access to something he can shape according to his obsessions. The SS under Heiden is just muscle. Under Heinrich's emerging influence, it begins to become something else, something ideological, something racial. His personal life shifts too, as if even his intimate relationships must serve larger purposes. He meets Margaret Bowden, a nurse 7 years his senior, blonde and Protestant, the owner of a small nursing home in Berlin. She has money, which Heinrich desperately needs. She has Aryan features, which his racial ideology demands. There's little evidence of passion in their courtship, just mutual benefit wrapped in the language of duty. They marry on July 3, 1928, in a ceremony stripped of Catholic ritual despite Heinrich's upbringing. He's shedding his father's religion for something he believes is older, purer, more connected to Germanic blood. Margaret's money allows him to quit his job selling fertilizer and devote himself entirely to SS work. She's purchased his future without realizing what she's buying. January 6, 1929. The date arrives like destiny wearing a bureaucrat's suit. Hitler appoints Heinrich Himmler as Reichsführer SS, leader of the entire organization. He inherits a force of just 280 men scattered across Germany, a private army smaller than a single company, barely worth mentioning in the broader constellation of Weimar political violence. The SA numbers in the tens of thousands. The communist militias are even larger. The SS is nothing. A footnote. A curiosity. But Heinrich sees what others don't. Small means controllable. Small means pure. Small means he can build exactly what lives in his imagination, unconstrained by existing structures or competing visions. His first act as Reichsführer is to impose racial requirements that make the SS not just a guard force, but a racial vanguard. Applicants must prove Aryan ancestry back to 1750. They must meet strict physical criteria for height, build, facial features. Blue eyes and blonde hair are preferred, but not mandatory, as long as the overall appearance suggests Nordic heritage. Heinrich personally reviews photographs of applicants, measuring skull shapes, studying jawlines, convinced he can identify racial quality through physiognomy. It's pseudoscience elevated to policy, but it works psychologically. Men selected for the SS begin to believe they're genuinely superior, chosen by biology itself. He institutes marriage regulations that would be comical if they weren't so sinister. SS men cannot marry without permission from the Race and Settlement Main Office, an organization Heinrich creates specifically to police breeding. Potential wives must submit photographs and genealogical records. Their families are investigated, their racial purity assessed. If a woman's great-grandmother had a suspiciously curved nose or a Jewish-sounding maiden name, the marriage is forbidden. Heinrich is trying to create a new aristocracy based on blood, breeding humans like livestock, convinced that genetic purity will produce superior soldiers and eventually a master race. The headquarters in Munich becomes his laboratory. Files multiply like bacteria. Every SS man has a personnel folder containing not just service records, but racial evaluations, photographs from multiple angles, ancestral charts resembling family trees grown obsessive and paranoid. Heinrich spends hours reviewing these documents, his weak eyes straining behind spectacles, his mind categorizing and calculating. He's not building an army. He's curating a collection of human specimens, each one theoretically exemplifying Aryan perfection, though reality rarely matches ideology. Many SS men are average-looking Germans with questionable ancestry, but the paperwork says otherwise, and in Heinrich's world, documentation matters more than truth. His ideology expands beyond simple anti-Semitism into elaborate mysticism. He becomes obsessed with Germanic paganism, convinced that Christianity is a Jewish conspiracy that weakened Nordic warrior culture. He reads voraciously about ancient Germanic tribes, about runes and rituals, about Odin and Valhalla. He begins to imagine the SS not just as Hitler's bodyguard, but as a neo-pagan knightly order, modern Teutonic knights who will reclaim Europe for the Aryan race. His officers think he's eccentric, this small man with chronic stomach problems talking about ancient gods and racial destiny. But they follow because the movement is growing and Heinrich controls access to the Führer. The numbers begin to climb. By the end of 1929, the SS has over 1,000 members. By 1930, 3,000. They're still vastly outnumbered by the SA brown shirts, but they're different, more disciplined, better organized, loyal to Hitler in ways the SA leadership increasingly isn't. The SS men wear black uniforms now, designed to intimidate and impress. The skull and crossbones insignia glints silver on black caps. They stand at Nazi rallies like statues carved from intimidation, perfectly still while the SA brawls with communists in the streets. Heinrich has created a theatrical elite, warriors who perform dominance through aesthetics as much as violence. His relationship with Hitler deepens through this period, though it's not friendship in any normal sense. Hitler finds Heinrich useful but slightly ridiculous, this nervous little man who can't hold his liquor and vomits at the sight of blood. Yet Heinrich's absolute loyalty is intoxicating. He never questions, never doubts, never suggests alternatives. When Hitler speaks, Heinrich listens as if receiving divine revelation. When Hitler gives orders, Heinrich executes them with mechanical precision. This is the relationship Heinrich always craved with his father, but never received. Total subordination in exchange for occasional approval. It's psychologically unhealthy and historically catastrophic, but for Heinrich it feels like love. He moves his family to Munich, establishing a household that reflects his contradictions. Margaret manages the domestic sphere, while Heinrich spends 18-hour days on SS business. Their daughter Gudrun is born in 1929, and Heinrich dotes on her in the only way he knows how, with rigid affection and plans for a future that allow no deviation. At home, he's a bourgeois husband and father. At headquarters, he's transforming into something else, shedding whatever empathy might have existed in his younger self, replacing it with ideology so complete it crowds out competing emotions. The SA leadership watches Heinrich's growing influence with suspicion. Ernst Röhm, the SA chief of staff, sees the SS as pretentious and unnecessary, toy soldiers playing at aristocracy while real men do the fighting. Tensions simmer beneath the surface of Nazi unity. Heinrich carefully cultivates Hitler's favor, positioning the SS as personally loyal to the Führer while implying that the SA's loyalty is to Rome first. It's a dangerous game, but Heinrich plays it with the same obsessive calculation he brings to everything. He's learned that in revolutionary movements, proximity to the leader matters more than popularity with the ranks. By the end of 1929, the SS numbers 50,000 members, from 280 to 50,000 in less than a year. The growth isn't organic. It's engineered. Heinrich has created a recruitment machine that targets specific populations: disaffected veterans, ambitious young men, true believers in racial ideology, anyone who wants to feel special, chosen, superior. The racial requirements actually increase applications because people want to prove they meet the standards. It's brilliant manipulation of human psychology. Make something exclusive, and people will fight to join. But beneath the pageantry and growth, something darker is crystallizing. The SS isn't just becoming an elite guard. It's becoming an ideological instrument, a tool for enforcing racial policy, an organization that believes itself above law, because it serves a higher purpose. Heinrich has taken Hitler's anti-Semitism and weaponized it, taken his own obsessions with purity and given them institutional form. The files in Munich headquarters don't just contain personnel records anymore. They contain lists of enemies, categories of undesirables, plans still vague, but growing more concrete. Heinrich stands at his office window on the last day of 1929, looking out over Munich's rooftops toward a future only he can see clearly. He's 29 years old, commander of an organization that didn't exist 4 years ago, trusted confidant of a leader who will soon reshape Europe. His stomach hurts, as always. His body remains weak. But he's found something more powerful than physical strength. He's found bureaucracy wedded to ideology, organization married to hatred, and he's learning that you don't need muscles to murder millions. You just need systems, files, orders, men willing to follow them. The mechanism isn't complete yet, but the blueprint is emerging in his mind, drawn in categories and classifications, waiting only for opportunity to become operational. The question echoing through history toward us is simple and terrible. What happens when a mediocre man discovers he's good at organizing evil? Chapter 3. Building the Black Order, 1929 to 1933. The Great Depression crashes into Germany like a tidal wave of desperation in October 1929. Banks collapse. Factories close. Unemployment explodes from 2 million to 6 million within a year. Men who survived the trenches of the Great War now stand in bread lines, their dignity evaporating with their savings. The Weimar Republic, already fragile, begins to crack along every fault line. And Heinrich Himmler, watching from SS headquarters in Munich, sees opportunity rising from the ruins. Economic collapse means angry, desperate men searching for answers, for scapegoats, for anyone offering certainty in a world gone mad. The SS is ready to provide all three. He accelerates recruitment with the precision of an engineer building a machine. Every new economic shock brings fresh applicants to SS offices across Germany. Factory workers who've lost their jobs. University graduates who can't find positions. Veterans subsisting on worthless pensions. Heinrich offers them more than employment. He offers identity, purpose, the chance to be part of an elite racial vanguard that will save Germany from the forces destroying it. The Jewish bankers, the Marxist agitators, the racial inferiors weakening Aryan blood. His propaganda is simple, effective, and monstrous. Join the SS and become one of the chosen. Stand aside and be swept away with the degenerate masses. The racial requirements he established become even more elaborate. Applicants now need proof of pure Aryan ancestry back to 1750 for officers, 1700 for enlisted men. They submit photographs from the front, side, and back. Stand for physical examinations where SS doctors measure skull dimensions, nose angles, height ratios. Heinrich reviews each file personally in the early days, his pen scratching notes in the margins. Too Slavic. Possible Mediterranean influence. Acceptable Nordic type despite brown eyes. He's playing God with a filing cabinet, deciding who qualifies as human perfection based on pseudoscience and prejudice. But the system works psychologically in ways that transcend its factual absurdity. Men who pass the racial screening genuinely believe they've been scientifically validated as superior. They carry themselves differently, speak with unconscious arrogance, look at other Germans as lesser versions of themselves. Heinrich has discovered that if you tell people they're genetically elite often enough, with enough official documentation, they'll internalize it completely. The SS isn't just an organization. It's becoming a racial cult with Heinrich as its high priest. He establishes the Race and Settlement Main Office in 1931, bureaucratizing his obsessions into institutional form. The office doesn't just screen SS applicants. It investigates their fiancés, preventing marriages that might contaminate Aryan bloodlines. SS men must submit engagement announcements for approval. The prospective bride's family tree is examined. Her photograph analyzed. her medical history reviewed for hereditary diseases. If she has Jewish ancestry, if her features suggest racial mixing, if her family includes criminals or mentally ill relatives, permission is denied. The SS man can choose between his fiancée and his career. Most choose career. Heinrich calls these policies the marriage order, and he defends them with the fervor of a man who believes he's conducting genetic engineering. Every SS marriage is a breeding decision. Every child born to SS families represents another step toward racial purification. He imagines generations of increasingly perfect Aryans, each one taller, stronger, more Nordic than the last, until Germany is populated entirely by the racial ideal currently existing only in propaganda posters. It's eugenics taken to its logical extreme, humans reduced to breeding stock in service of ideological fantasy. His mysticism deepens alongside his racism. He becomes obsessed with Germanic prehistory, convinced that ancient Aryan civilizations achieved heights of glory before racial mixing and Christianity corrupted them. He funds archaeological expeditions searching for evidence of Nordic supremacy, commissions research into runic symbolism, designs SS ceremonies that blend military ritual with pagan aesthetics. New members swear oaths at midnight, torchlight flickering across their faces, their words invoking blood and soil and eternal loyalty to the Führer. It's theater designed to create psychological bonds stronger than law or reason. The black uniform becomes iconic during these years. Heinrich obsesses over every detail, working with designers to create maximum intimidation. The silver skull and crossbones on the cap represents death transcended, the SS man as warrior beyond normal human limits. The silver runes on the collar stand for Schutzstaffel, but also suggest ancient power channeled through modern organization. The entire aesthetic communicates racial superiority, military discipline, and willingness to commit violence without hesitation. When SS men walk through German streets, people move aside not just from fear, but from the psychological weight of their presentation. By 1932, the SS numbers over 50,000 men. They're still outnumbered by the SA's 400,000 brown shirts, but the quality difference is stark. SA men are street brawlers, useful for intimidating opponents, but undisciplined and often drunk. SS men are something else. They stand guard at Nazi rallies with mechanical precision. They don't brawl. They observe, memorize, report. Heinrich is building an intelligence apparatus inside a paramilitary organization, training his men to be not just warriors but informants, watching everyone, including other Nazis, for signs of disloyalty. The SA leadership grows increasingly nervous about Heinrich's ambitions. Ernst Röhm sees the SS as a rival power center, loyal to Hitler, but separate from his command structure. Tensions between the two organizations simmer through countless small conflicts. Jurisdiction disputes, recruitment competition, arguments over who guards what at Nazi events. Heinrich navigates these tensions carefully, always deferring to Röhm publicly, while privately ensuring Hitler understands that the SS is more reliable, more controllable, more ideologically pure than the SA rabble. He institutes strict behavioral codes that further distinguish SS men from brown shirts. No public drunkenness. No brawling unless ordered. Physical fitness is mandatory, with regular examinations ensuring every member meets standards. Smoking is discouraged as racially degenerative. Diet is monitored to optimize physical performance. Heinrich even issues guidelines on posture, believing that how a man stands reflects his racial quality. The SS is becoming less like a military unit and more like a monastic order, with Heinrich as its fanatical abbot enforcing rules that control every aspect of members' lives. His personal life remains strange and compartmentalized. Margaret manages their household and raises their daughter Gudrun, while Heinrich spends weeks away on SS business. He's uncomfortable with physical intimacy, viewing sex primarily as racial duty rather than pleasure. His chronic stomach problems worsen under stress, requiring special diets that make him even more isolated from normal social interactions. He can't drink without becoming ill. Can't eat rich foods without pain. His body is betraying his ambitions, remaining stubbornly weak while his mind constructs fantasies of Aryan supermen. The Nazi Party's electoral fortunes rise with Germany's misery. In September 1930, they win 18% of the vote, becoming the second-largest party in the Reichstag. In July 1932, they capture 37%, the largest share any party has achieved under Weimar democracy. Heinrich watches these victories with satisfaction, knowing that SS organization contributed to Nazi success in countless invisible ways. His men provided security at rallies, intimidated opponents, gathered intelligence on rival parties, presented an image of discipline that made the Nazis seem like the only force capable of restoring order to Germany's chaos. But Hitler still isn't chancellor. President Hindenburg, the ancient war hero, despises the Austrian corporal and refuses to appoint him despite Nazi electoral strength. Through the second half of 1932, Germany staggers through political crisis. Governments form and collapse within months. The Communist Party grows stronger, feeding on the same desperation that fuels Nazi support. Political violence intensifies. Street battles between Nazi and Communist paramilitaries leave dozens dead. Germany teeters on the edge of civil war, and Heinrich believes the SS will be the force that tips the balance. He expands SS infrastructure in preparation for seizure of power, establishes regional headquarters across Germany, creates specialized departments for intelligence, racial policy, and internal security, begins compiling lists of enemies who will need to be neutralized when the moment arrives. Jews, communists, social democrats, liberals, trade unionists, Freemasons, Catholics loyal to Rome rather than Germanic paganism. The categories multiply as Heinrich's paranoia finds bureaucratic expression. Every potential opponent must be identified, categorized, tracked. The filing cabinets in Munich headquarters overflow with index cards marking people for future action. His relationship with Reinhard Heydrich begins during this period, one of the most consequential partnerships in human history. Heydrich is everything Heinrich isn't. Tall, blonde, athletic, a skilled fencer and pilot. He's also amoral, brilliant, and utterly ruthless. Heinrich appoints him chief of SS intelligence in 1931, recognizing that Heydrich's talents complement his own perfectly. Heinrich is the ideological visionary and bureaucratic organizer. Heydrich is the operative, the man who can translate vision into violence without hesitation or remorse. Together, they begin building what will become the SD, the Sicherheitsdienst, the security service that will eventually terrorize all of Europe. December 1932 arrives with Germany in deadlock. Hindenburg has appointed a series of chancellors who can't govern because no party commands a majority. The Nazi vote has actually declined slightly in November elections, suggesting their momentum might be stalling. Some party members panic, fearing they've missed their moment. But Heinrich remains confident. He's built an organization designed specifically for this moment of chaos. The SS doesn't need electoral majorities. It needs only opportunity and ruthlessness. Both are coming. Behind closed doors, conservative politicians desperate to maintain their own power begin reconsidering Hitler. They convince themselves they can control him, use his popular support while constraining his radicalism through coalition government. It's a catastrophic miscalculation born from desperation and arrogance. They believe the Nazis are just another political party that can be managed through normal political means. They don't understand that Heinrich has spent 4 years building something unprecedented, an ideological army loyal to one man, convinced of its racial superiority, trained to view violence as virtue, waiting only for permission to unleash everything they believe. January 30th, 1933. Adolf Hitler is appointed Chancellor of Germany. Heinrich Himmler, 32 years old, commander of 52,000 SS men, stands ready. Everything he's built, every racial screening, every midnight oath ceremony, every file documenting enemies of the movement, all of it is about to become operational. The SS isn't just protecting the Führer anymore. The SS is about to become the instrument through which ideology transforms into terror, through which racism becomes policy, through which a failed chicken farmer's obsessions become the machinery of industrial murder. But first, they need to consolidate power. First, they need to eliminate every alternative to Nazi rule. First, they need to show Germany what the SS is truly capable of when given permission to act without constraint. The black uniforms are moving through German streets now with new authority, and Heinrich Himmler, the weak-bodied bureaucrat with the iron will, is finally getting his chance to prove that documentation and determination can be more lethal than any weapon ever forged. Chapter 4: Consolidating Terror, 1933 to 1934. The Reichstag burns on the night of February 27, 1933. Flames tear through the Parliament building's dome, smoke billowing into Berlin's winter sky, visible for miles. A Dutch communist named Marinus van der Lubbe is arrested inside, and whether he acted alone or was a convenient scapegoat becomes irrelevant within hours. Hitler and his inner circle arrive at the scene, and Hermann Göring, observing the inferno, allegedly shouts that this is the beginning of communist revolution. Heinrich Himmler, standing in the shadows as always, says nothing. He's already calculating how to exploit this moment. The fire is still burning when he begins drafting arrest lists from memory, pulling names from the files he's maintained obsessively for years. By dawn, SS and police units are conducting coordinated raids across Germany. Communist Party offices, trade union headquarters, social democratic meeting halls. The doors are kicked in before most Germans have finished breakfast. Thousands are arrested within 48 hours. For 1,000 in Prussia alone. They're not charged with specific crimes. There are no trials. The Reichstag fire decree, signed by Hindenburg on February 28, suspends civil liberties indefinitely. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, all evaporating like morning fog under Hitler's sun. Heinrich has waited for this his entire political life. The constraints of law are gone. The SS can finally act according to its nature. But arresting thousands creates an immediate practical problem. German prisons are already full. Police stations can't handle the influx. Arrested men are crammed into basements, police barracks, makeshift detention centers that quickly become overwhelmed. On March 20th, 1933, Heinrich announces the solution. A concentration camp will be established at Dachau, just 10 miles northwest of Munich, on the grounds of an abandoned munitions factory. He frames it as humanitarian, a way to protect communist agitators from the angry German population, a place for political education rather than punishment. The language is carefully chosen. Protective custody, re-education. Work makes you free. The reality will be something else entirely. Dachau opens on March 22nd with its first transport of prisoners. 200 political detainees, mostly communists, arrive to find a camp that's barely functional. Barbed wire strung hastily. Guard towers only partially constructed. Barracks that still smell of cordite and rust from their previous military use. But Heinrich has appointed Theodor Eicke as commandant, and Eicke is exactly the kind of man the SS needs. A former chemist with a violent temper and absolute contempt for weakness, Eicke views prisoners not as humans with rights, but as enemies requiring discipline through terror. He begins developing the system that will define the entire concentration camp network for the next 12 years. The rules Eicke institutes at Dachau are designed to break human spirit through arbitrary cruelty. Prisoners must stand at attention for hours regardless of weather. Any mistake in following orders results in beating. Speaking without permission earns solitary confinement in lightless cells barely large enough to stand in. Attempting escape means execution, but so does moving too slowly, or looking at a guard wrong, or being selected at random when Eicke needs to demonstrate authority. The violence isn't random chaos. It's systematized, documented, turned into official regulations that guards must follow. Heinrich approves every rule personally, his bureaucratic mind transforming sadism into policy. He visits Dachau, regularly during these early months, touring the grounds with the careful attention of a factory manager inspecting production lines. He watches prisoners at forced labor, reviews punishment records, suggests improvements to efficiency. His weak stomach reportedly troubles him when witnessing beatings, but he doesn't stop them. Instead, he retreats to his office and writes memos about maintaining discipline, about the importance of SS men remaining emotionally detached from their duties. He's learning that his physical weakness doesn't matter if he can delegate violence to men who enjoy it. By June 1933, Dachau holds 1,500 prisoners. Other camps are opening across Germany, each following the model Heinrich is perfecting. Oranienburg, near Berlin. Esterwagen in the northwest. Lichtenberg for women. The concentration camp system is metastasizing, growing from improvised solution to permanent institution. The initial justification that these camps hold dangerous political enemies during emergency quietly disappears from official statements. The camps aren't temporary anymore. They're becoming foundational to how a Nazi Germany operates. Heinrich's authority expands with terrifying speed. In March 1933, he's appointed police president of Munich. In April, he takes command of the Bavarian political police. By the end of the year, he controls political police forces across most German states. Each appointment brings new power, new resources, new opportunities to implement his vision. He's methodically absorbing Germany's entire law enforcement apparatus into the SS structure, creating a state within a state that answers only to Hitler and increasingly functions according to racial ideology rather than legal principles. His partnership with Reinhard Heydrich becomes operational during this consolidation. In April, they establish the Gestapo headquarters in Berlin, transforming political policing into a science of terror. Heydrich builds networks of informants that penetrate every level of German society. Neighbors spy on neighbors. Coworkers report suspicious conversations. Children inform on parents who speak against the regime. The information flows into Gestapo headquarters where it's cataloged, cross-referenced, used to identify anyone who might oppose Nazi rule. Heinrich provides the bureaucratic framework. Heydrich provides the operational ruthlessness. Together, they create surveillance infrastructure that makes resistance almost impossible. The SA, meanwhile, is becoming a problem that threatens everything Heinrich has built. Ernst Röhm's brown shirts now number nearly 3 million men, dwarfing both the German army and the SS. Röhm speaks openly about a second revolution, about replacing the conservative military establishment with SA leadership, about pushing Nazi ideology further than even Hitler seems willing to go. The army generals are terrified, threatening to back a military coup if Hitler doesn't control his brown shirt radicals. And Heinrich, watching this power struggle unfold, sees his opportunity to eliminate the only force standing between the SS and total dominance. He begins feeding Hitler's paranoia about Röhm. Through carefully worded reports, he suggests the SA chief is planning a coup. That Röhm's talk of second revolution actually means replacing Hitler. That the SA's loyalty is questionable, while the SS remains absolutely devoted. Most of this is fabrication or exaggeration, but Heinrich presents it with the authority of intelligence reports, complete with fabricated evidence and manufactured documentation. He's learned that Hitler trusts paperwork, that the Führer believes typed reports more readily than spoken warnings. Heydrich supports Heinrich's campaign with his own intelligence operations, creating a dossier on Röhm that emphasizes his homosexuality. This is particularly useful because Nazi ideology views homosexuality as racial degeneracy, weakness that undermines Aryan strength. Never mind that Heinrich and others have known about Röhm's sexuality for years without caring. Now it becomes a weapon, evidence of corruption requiring purification. The dossier grows thicker with each passing week, filled with surveillance reports, testimony from informants, photographs that may or may not be genuine. Through the spring of 1934, tension builds toward inevitable violence. Hitler wavers, reluctant to move against his oldest ally. But the army makes clear they'll only swear loyalty to Hitler if he eliminates the SA threat. Conservative politicians add their pressure, terrified of Rome's revolutionary rhetoric. And Heinrich keeps feeding the fire, producing new intelligence suggesting immediate danger, arguing that the SS must be authorized to act before the SA strikes first. June 30th, 1934. The Night of the Long Knives begins with coordinated SS operations across Germany. Heinrich has planned every detail with obsessive precision. Lists of targets, teams assigned to each arrest, timing coordinated to prevent warning. At dawn, SS units move simultaneously in Munich, Berlin, and dozens of other cities. They arrest SA leaders from their beds, drag them to SS barracks, execute them in courtyards and basements. Ernst Röhm himself is arrested at a hotel in Bad Wiessee, found in bed with a young SA member. He's taken to Munich's Stadelheim prison, given a pistol, and told to shoot himself. When he refuses, demanding trial, SS officers enter his cell and kill him at point-blank range. The purge extends beyond SA leadership. Heinrich uses this opportunity to settle countless scores, eliminating anyone who has opposed him, embarrassed him, or simply made the mistake of knowing too much. Gustav von Kahr, who helped suppress the beer hall putsch, is murdered and his body dumped in a swamp. Gregor Strasser, who once rivaled Hitler for party leadership, is shot in Gestapo headquarters. Kurt von Schleicher, former chancellor who tried to split the Nazi movement, is killed in his home along with his wife. The SS murder squads work through the night and into the next day, killing at least 85 people, possibly several hundred. The exact number will never be known because Heinrich destroys many records. Hitler announces the purge was necessary to prevent SA coup, that Rome and others were traitors who had to be eliminated for Germany's security. The German public, already intimidated into silence, accepts this explanation or pretends to. The army, relieved that the SA threat is eliminated, swears personal loyalty to Hitler. And Heinrich Himmler, the man who organized the entire operation, who provided the intelligence justifying it, who selected most of the victims and ensured their execution, emerges with the SS positioned as the regime's indispensable instrument of violence. The SA is effectively broken, from 3 million members to a neutered auxiliary force stripped of political power. The vacuum is filled immediately by SS expansion. Heinrich receives authorization to triple his forces. The black uniforms multiply across Germany like a virus colonizing healthy tissue. By the end of 1934, the SS numbers over 200,000 men, all personally loyal to Heinrich through him to Hitler, all trained to view themselves as racial elite authorized to do whatever is necessary to protect the Aryan state. Dachau becomes the model for expansion. Eich is promoted to inspector of concentration camps, tasked with standardizing procedures across the growing network. His regulations from Dachau, refined through a year of experimental cruelty, become official policy. Every camp will operate according to his principles. Absolute power for guards. Zero rights for prisoners. Violence as standard practice. Heinrich reviews and approves the regulations, adding bureaucratic polish to Eich's sadism. The concentration camp system isn't improvisation anymore. It's a machine designed for specific purpose, tested and refined, ready to expand far beyond anyone currently imagines. He stands in his Munich office on the last day of 1934, reviewing reports of SS growth, camp expansion, political police consolidation. In 2 years, he's transformed from commander of a small elite guard to master of Germany's entire terror apparatus. He controls the camps. He controls the Gestapo. He controls the SD intelligence service. He's eliminated the SA as a rival. The army respects him because he saved them from Rome. Hitler trusts him because he's proven absolutely reliable. And he's just getting started. The concentration camps currently hold maybe 5,000 prisoners, mostly German communists and political opponents. The system can hold so many more. The files in his cabinets contain so many more names, so many racial enemies, so many categories of undesirables, so many future prisoners waiting to be arrested once the moment is right. Heinrich Himmler is 34 years old, and he's built the foundation for something unprecedented in human history. An empire of terror administered with bureaucratic efficiency, powered by racial ideology, constrained by nothing except imagination and opportunity. Both are about to expand beyond anything even he currently envisions. Chapter 5. The SS Empire Expands. 1934 to 1939. President Hindenburg dies on August 2, 1934, taking with him the last constitutional barrier between Hitler and absolute power. Within hours, Hitler merges the offices of president and chancellor into a single position, Führer, and demands personal loyalty oaths from every soldier and civil servant in Germany. They swear allegiance not to Germany, not to the Constitution, but to Adolf Hitler personally. Heinrich Himmler watches this consolidation with deep satisfaction, understanding that his own empire is now secured. The SS has sworn these oaths for years. Now the entire nation follows a model he helped create. Loyalty to one man. Obedience without question. The complete subordination of law to will. June 17, 1936. The appointment arrives that Heinrich has been maneuvering toward since the night of the Long Knives. Hitler names him chief of German police, unifying all police forces under single command for the first time in German history. Every police officer in every city, every rural constable, every detective, they all now answer to Heinrich through a command structure he spent 2 years designing. He immediately reorganizes everything into 2 main branches. The Ordnungspolizei, the regular uniformed police who maintain public order, and the Sicherheitspolizei, the security police combining the Gestapo and criminal police under one roof. Both branches operate under SS principles, gradually absorbing SS ideology, SS racial doctrine, SS methods. The merger isn't just administrative. Heinrich is transforming German policing from law enforcement into racial enforcement. Police academies begin teaching courses on racial science. Officers learn to identify Jews by physical characteristics. Study the hierarchy of Aryan and non-Aryan races. Practice categorizing people into groups deserving protection or requiring elimination. The entire conceptual framework shifts. Crime is no longer defined by actions, but by biology. A Jew accused of relationships with an Aryan woman isn't committing statutory rape under the Nuremberg laws. He's committing racial defilement, pollution of German blood, an offense requiring not prison, but removal from the racial community entirely. Dachau and the other camps expand to accommodate this new philosophy. The prisoner population diversifies beyond political opponents. Homosexuals arrive wearing pink triangles sewn to their uniforms. Jehovah's Witnesses refusing military service wear purple. Roma and Sinti are designated as asocials, arrested for the crime of existing outside settled German society. The categories multiply as Heinrich's bureaucratic mind finds new classifications for undesirability. Professional criminals, work-shy individuals, race defilers. Each group receives different colored triangles, creating a visual hierarchy of Nazi hatred rendered in fabric and thread. The camps themselves are evolving from crude detention centers into something more systematic. Sachsenhausen opens north of Berlin in 1936, built from the ground up according to Heinrich's specifications. The layout is geometric, designed for maximum surveillance and control. Guard towers positioned to observe every corner. Barracks arranged in perfect rows. A parade ground where prisoners stand for hours during roll call, regardless of weather. The architecture of domination made concrete and barbed wire. Buchenwald opens near Weimar in 1937 on the slopes of Ettersberg, the mountain where Goethe once walked seeking poetic inspiration. Now prisoners haul stones up those same slopes until their bodies collapse. Heinrich visits his camps regularly, inspecting them with the critical eye of quality control manager. He notes deficiencies in guard discipline, suggests improvements to prisoner labor extraction, reviews punishment procedures. His weak stomach still troubles him when confronting direct violence, but he's developed the bureaucrat's talent for viewing suffering through abstraction. These aren't individual humans being beaten and starved. They're categories being processed, units being managed, problems requiring administrative solutions. The distance between his office paperwork and the reality of screaming prisoners makes the horror psychologically manageable. The economic dimension of concentration camps emerges during this period, revealing Heinrich's ambition extends beyond punishment into profit. He establishes the German Earth and Stone Works Company in 1938, exploiting camp labor to produce building materials for Nazi construction projects. Prisoners quarry stone, manufacture bricks, work until their bodies fail, then are replaced by new arrests. The SS is becoming not just an ideological organization, but an economic enterprise, with Heinrich calculating labor productivity, production costs, profit margins. Human beings reduced to units of economic analysis. His Lebensborn program launches in December 1935, another manifestation of his breeding obsession. The Society of the Well of Life provides maternity homes where racially valuable unmarried women can give birth anonymously, their babies then adopted by SS families. Heinrich envisions eventually kidnapping racially appropriate children from occupied territories, Germanizing them through adoption, literally stealing genetic material he believes valuable. It's eugenics transformed from theory into kidnapping operation, though the full scope won't emerge until war provides opportunities his peacetime authority can't access. The SS continues expanding at exponential rates. 200,000 members in 1934 becomes 240,000 by 1936, then over 250,000 by 1938. Heinrich maintains strict racial screening even as numbers grow, convinced that quantity matters only if quality remains high. Each applicant still submits photographs, genealogies, physical measurements. Each potential wife is still investigated. The bureaucracy of racial purity expands alongside the organization it serves, generating mountains of paperwork that Heinrich reviews with obsessive attention. His Archaeological Heritage Institute, the Ahnenerbe, receives official SS sponsorship in 1937, funding expeditions searching for evidence of ancient Aryan civilization. Teams travel to Tibet seeking proof of Nordic racial origins. Excavate German forests for Germanic tribal artifacts. Measure skulls in museum collections. The research is pseudo-scientific nonsense, conclusions determined before investigation begins, but Heinrich believes it passionately. He's convinced that proving Aryan superiority through archaeology will strengthen the ideological foundation of everything he's building. That documentation of ancient Nordic glory will justify modern Nordic dominance. Kristallnacht explodes across Germany on the night of November 9, 1938. The pogrom is officially a spontaneous eruption of German anger after a Jewish teenager kills a German diplomat in Paris. The reality is coordinated violence by party members and SA remnants, smashing Jewish shops, burning synagogues, beating and killing Jews in the streets. Heinrich's SS largely stays back, observing but not participating in the chaos. Not from moral restraint, but from his preference for organized violence over spontaneous riots. The SA's methods are crude, emotional, inefficient. Heinrich is already envisioning something more systematic. Over 30,000 Jewish men are arrested in Kristallnacht's aftermath, flooding the concentration camps with new prisoners. This overwhelms existing capacity, forcing rapid expansion. Dachau, Sachsenhausen, and Buchenwald all add new barracks. The Jewish prisoners receive particularly brutal treatment, targeted by guards who've absorbed years of anti-Semitic propaganda. They're assigned the hardest labor, receive the smallest food rations, face punishment for infractions other prisoners might escape. Many are held until their families can arrange immigration paperwork and pay the extortionate exit taxes Nazi policy requires. The camps are becoming tools for forcing Jewish exodus from Germany. Heinrich observes this function carefully. The concentration camps can encourage immigration through fear, hold Jewish men until their families flee abroad. The same system that punishes political enemies can solve the Jewish question through terror and expulsion. At least that's the theory in 1938. What Heinrich doesn't yet fully recognize is that he's building infrastructure with potential far beyond immigration incentive. He's creating a system for concentrating, controlling, and exploiting populations deemed racially undesirable. The machinery exists. Only the purpose is still evolving. His personal life remains compartmentalized and strange. Margaret manages their household in Munich, while Heinrich spends weeks traveling between Berlin meetings, camp inspections, and SS ceremonies. His daughter, Gudrun, adores him, seeing only the doting father who brings gifts from his travels, never understanding that her papa commands the camps she hears whispered about. Heinrich begins an affair with his secretary Hedwig Pothist in 1938, eventually fathering 2 children with her while remaining married to Margaret. His private morality contradicts everything he publicly enforces, but Heinrich seems incapable of recognizing the hypocrisy. The SS establishes its military wing more formally during these years. The Waffen-SS begins as 3 regiments of soldiers under SS command, but outside army control. The Wehrmacht generals are furious about this parallel military force, but Hitler authorizes it as reward for SS loyalty during the Rome Purge. Heinrich sees military experience as essential for his racial elite. The Waffen-SS will prove Aryan superiority through combat performance, demonstrate that ideologically motivated soldiers fight better than conventional troops, and provide trained killers who can be redirected to other purposes when needed. By 1939, Heinrich controls an empire that would have been unimaginable 5 years earlier. The concentration camp system holds over 21,000 prisoners across 6 major camps. The Gestapo operates from offices in every German city, supported by networks of informants that make private conversation dangerous. The SD intelligence service gathers information on everyone, creating dossiers on millions of Germans, cataloging potential enemies. The regular police follow SS directives. The Waffen-SS is becoming a credible military force, and overseeing all of it, reviewing reports, issuing orders, planning expansions, sits Heinrich Himmler with his weak stomach and iron will. The files in his Berlin headquarters overflow with documentation. Personnel records for hundreds of thousands of SS men. Prisoner cards for everyone who's ever entered concentration camp. Intelligence reports on suspected enemies. Racial evaluations of German citizens. Lists of Jews, their addresses, their property, their movements tracked with bureaucratic precision. The paperwork represents power, control transformed into cardboard and ink. Heinrich can look at these files and see the future he's creating. A Germany purified of racial enemies. A Europe under Germanic domination. An Aryan empire stretching from Atlantic to Urals, administered by SS colonial masters governing Slavic slaves. But all of this, the camps and police and intelligence networks and files, all of it exists within German borders and remains constrained by peacetime limitations. The system Heinrich has built is designed for control and persecution within a functioning state. What happens when that state goes to war? When German armies conquer territories where millions of racial enemies live beyond the reach of German law? When the constraints of international opinion and diplomatic consequences evaporate in the chaos of total war? Heinrich has built the machinery. War will provide the fuel, and the result will transform persecution into something unprecedented in its scale and horror. But in early 1939, as spring arrives and Hitler demands the Wehrmacht prepare for Polish invasion, these possibilities remain theoretical. Heinrich reviews his files, inspects his camps, expands his empire, and waits for opportunities that war will bring. The SS is ready. The concentration camps are operational. The racial ideology is internalized across the organization. Everything is in place. All that's missing is the chaos that will permit his obsessions to become operational on continental scale. Chapter 6. Rehearsal for Genocide, 1939 to 1941. German tanks crossed the Polish border at 4:45 on the morning of September 1st, 1939. The Wehrmacht smashes through Polish defenses with speed that shocks military observers worldwide. This is blitzkrieg, lightning war, coordinated armor, and air power moving faster than defending forces can react. But behind the advancing tanks, following the front lines by hours or days, come different units. Einsatzgruppen, special task forces, mobile killing squads under SS command. Heinrich Himmler has been planning their deployment for months, creating operational groups designed specifically for tasks the regular army won't perform. Tasks involving not military targets, but civilians. Not soldiers, but categories. The Einsatzgruppen comprise around 3,000 men divided into 5 operational groups, each assigned to follow specific Wehrmacht armies into Poland. They're drawn from SS, Gestapo, criminal police, and SD, all trained in the particular mindset required for their mission. They wear Wehrmacht field gray rather than SS black to avoid identification, but they answer to Heinrich and through him to Heinrich, not to military commanders. Their orders are deliberately vague, speaking of securing rear areas and eliminating threats to German forces. But the intended targets are clearly specified through briefings that leave no room for misunderstanding. Polish intelligentsia, Catholic priests, aristocracy, Jews, anyone who might lead Polish resistance or preserve Polish national identity. The killings begin within days of invasion. In town after town, Einsatzgruppen units arrive with lists prepared in Berlin from census data and intelligence reports. They round up teachers, lawyers, doctors, priests, force them into town squares, or march them to forests just beyond city limits. The shooting is done efficiently, without ceremony. Bodies fall into ditches that local Jews are forced to dig before their own execution. The scale is unprecedented. By the end of 1939, approximately 60,000 Polish civilians are dead, murdered not in combat, but through systematic execution based on their profession or ethnicity. Heinrich travels to Poland in October to observe operations personally. He tours freshly conquered territory, reviewing Einsatzgruppen reports, meeting with commanders. The violence troubles him physically. His stomach churns. His hands shake. But he doesn't order it stopped. Instead, he focuses on improving efficiency, suggesting better coordination with Wehrmacht units, recommending more thorough documentation of actions taken. He's learning that his weakness for direct violence doesn't prevent him from organizing it. That distance and paperwork provides psychological insulation from the reality his orders create. The invasion reveals something crucial about German military culture. Most Wehrmacht officers are horrified by Einsatzgruppen actions and protest to their superiors. These are murders, not military operations. War crimes violating international law and military honor. But the protests go nowhere. Hitler has authorized SS independence from military command for security operations. The generals can object, but they can't stop it. And, crucially, most don't try very hard. They consider the killings distasteful, but accept the logic that harsh measures are necessary in the East, that Slavs and Jews require different treatment than Western Europeans. The moral line they imagine defending turns out to be drawn in sand. Heinrich's larger vision for Poland extends far beyond these initial massacres. He's been developing plans for German colonization that make the Einsatzgruppen actions seem almost restrained by comparison. General Plan Ost, the master plan for the East, envisions transforming Poland and eventually all of Eastern Europe into German living space. This requires removing the existing population. Millions of Poles will be expelled to rump territories or enslaved as agricultural labor. Their land will be settled by German colonists from the Reich and ethnic Germans scattered across Eastern Europe. Cities will be renamed. Polish language suppressed. Catholic churches closed. The entire nation will be erased and replaced with Germanic settlement. He establishes the Reich Main Security Office in September 1939, consolidating Gestapo, criminal police, and SD into single organization under Heinrich's operational command, but Heinrich's overall authority. The RSHA becomes the institutional core of Nazi terror, the bureaucratic heart pumping orders through arteries that reach every corner of German-controlled territory. Its headquarters on Prinz-Albrechtstrasse in Berlin houses offices where clerks type deportation orders between coffee breaks, where administrators calculate transport logistics for populations marked for removal, where the language of genocide is sanitized into bureaucratic German. Concentration camps expand dramatically to handle Polish prisoners. Existing German camps overflow, forcing construction of new facilities. Stutthof opens near Danzig in September 1939. Auschwitz is established in occupied Poland in June 1940 on the site of former Polish army barracks. These aren't just detention centers anymore. They're becoming laboratories for racial policy, testing grounds for methods that will later apply across all conquered territories. The prisoners are worked harder, fed less, treated more brutally than in German camps. The constraints of domestic German public opinion don't apply in Poland. The SS can experiment. Poland's Jewish population of 3.5 million immediately becomes Heinrich's primary concern. German Jews could be pressured to emigrate, but where can millions of Polish Jews go with war preventing overseas migration? The initial solution is ghettoization, concentrating Jews into sealed districts within cities, theoretically temporary, until a territorial solution emerges. The Lodz Ghetto is established in February 1940. Warsaw follows in October. Krakow in March 1941. Walls are built, gates guarded. Jews are forced from their homes into overcrowded ghettos where disease and starvation begin killing thousands monthly. The ghettos serve multiple functions in Heinrich's evolving plans. They concentrate Jewish populations for easier administration. They exploit Jewish labor while minimizing contact with Aryans. They create conditions where Jews die from disease and malnutrition without requiring direct German action. Heinrich receives reports on ghetto mortality rates with the same detached interest he brings to all statistics. Numbers of dead, causes of death, cost per prisoner per day. Everything reduced to data requiring optimization. But ghettoization creates as many problems as it solves. The ghettos are expensive to maintain, requiring German resources for guarding and minimal food provision. Disease threatens to spread beyond ghetto walls. And fundamentally, ghettos don't solve what Nazis increasingly call the Jewish question. The Jews are concentrated, but still exist on territory Germany considers its own. Heinrich begins exploring more permanent solutions, though what that means remains unclear even to him in 1940. Deportation to some distant territory? Madagascar is discussed briefly before British naval superiority makes overseas deportation impossible. Further east? Perhaps Siberia, after defeating the Soviet Union? The planning remains vague, but the intent is crystallizing. Jews cannot remain in German-controlled Europe. The Action T4 euthanasia program begins in October 1939, revealing new dimensions of Nazi willingness to murder their own citizens. The program targets Germans with physical disabilities, mental illness, or genetic conditions deemed hereditary threats to Aryan racial health. Doctors identify patients for elimination. Special transport teams move them to killing centers equipped with fake shower rooms where carbon monoxide gas kills patients efficiently. The bodies are cremated, and families receive letters explaining their relatives died from natural causes. Between 70 and 80,000 Germans are murdered in this program before public pressure forces semi-official termination in August 1941. Heinrich isn't directly responsible for T4, which operates under different bureaucratic channels, but he observes with intense interest. The program demonstrates that Germans will accept killing of their own citizens if framed medically and carried out bureaucratically. It develops personnel experienced in operating gas chambers and crematoria. It refines cover stories and documentation procedures. It proves that systematic murder can be disguised through paperwork and institutional distance. These lessons will prove applicable when attention turns from disabled Germans to Jews throughout Europe. The SS continues its military expansion alongside these occupation duties. The Waffen-SS grows from 3 regiments to multiple divisions by 1941. They fight in France, the Balkans, prove themselves capable soldiers despite Wehrmacht skepticism. This military credibility matters to Heinrich, demonstrating that SS racial ideology produces effective warriors. But the Waffen-SS also provides a pool of trained, indoctrinated men who can be redirected from combat to other operations requiring military skills without military scruples. The line between soldier and executioner is becoming permeable. His personal mysticism deepens during these years of expansion. He increases funding for the Ahnenerbe, sending expeditions throughout newly conquered territories searching for Germanic archaeological evidence. Visits ancient Germanic sites in Poland. Attends SS ceremonies timed to pagan solstices rather than Christian holidays. He's constructing a complete SS worldview that positions the organization not just as Hitler's tool, but as the vanguard of Aryan racial destiny. Every SS man is taught he's part of thousand-year struggle between races, that his actions serve purposes transcending conventional morality, that history will judge him a hero regardless of what current law or religion might say. The occupied territories reveal capacities for violence that perhaps surprise even Heinrich. German police battalions, regular uniformed police from German cities, participate in mass shootings alongside Einsatzgruppen with minimal protest. They're not SS fanatics. They're ordinary policemen, many middle-aged family men from Hamburg and Bremen, shooting Jewish men, women, and children into ditches because their commanders order it and their comrades are watching. The banality is terrifying. Heinrich has discovered that ordinary Germans will commit extraordinary atrocities given orders, peer pressure, and ideological justification that frames murder as necessary duty. By spring 1941, Heinrich's empire has metastasized beyond anything existing 2 years earlier. The concentration camp system has expanded into occupied Poland. The Einsatzgruppen have murdered over 100,000 civilians. The ghettos concentrate millions of Jews under starvation conditions. The T4 program has demonstrated gas as an efficient killing method. The RSHA coordinates terror across territories stretching from France to Poland. The Waffen-SS numbers over 150,000 men. And overseeing all of it, planning next phases, reading reports, issuing directives, sits Heinrich with his chronic stomach pain and expanding ambitions. He's learned that systematic murder is possible if properly organized, that Germans will follow orders to kill civilians, that ideological indoctrination overrides normal moral restraints, that bureaucracy provides psychological distance that makes participation bearable, that careful documentation and euphemistic language obscure the reality of actions. All of these lessons from Poland and the euthanasia program are about to be applied on scale that dwarfs everything preceding it. Because in June 1941, Germany invades the Soviet Union, and Heinrich's Einsatzgruppen follow the Wehrmacht east into territories holding millions of Jews and Slavs that Nazi ideology designates for elimination. The rehearsal is over. The main performance is about to begin, and Heinrich Himmler, the failed chicken farmer turned architect of systematic murder, has built precisely the machinery needed to transform ideology into industrial-scale death. Poland has proven the concept. The invasion of the Soviet Union will provide the scope, and the concentration camps, the SS, the Einsatzgruppen, the entire apparatus Heinrich has constructed over a decade of obsessive organization, will finally fulfill the purpose for which he built it. The genocide is about to begin in earnest, and every system is operational, every lesson from Poland absorbed, every bureaucratic process refined, and ready for expansion beyond anything history has previously witnessed. Chapter 7. Operation Barbarossa and Mass Murder, 1941 to 1942. 3 million German soldiers crossed the Soviet border at 3:15 in the morning on June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history, crashes into Stalin's unprepared forces with devastating effect. Soviet divisions collapse. Hundreds of thousands of Red Army soldiers surrender within weeks. German tanks race hundreds of miles into Soviet territory, leaving burning villages and executed commissars in their wake. But this isn't just military conquest. Hitler has declared this a war of annihilation, explicitly ordering Wehrmacht commanders to disregard international law and treat Soviet territory as a realm where normal rules don't apply. And behind the Wehrmacht, following in trucks and requisition vehicles, come Heinrich Himmler's Einsatzgruppen, now expanded to 4 groups totaling 3,000 men, with orders more explicit and murderous than anything given in Poland. The directives leave no ambiguity. Einsatzgruppen will secure rear areas by eliminating communist officials, partisans, and Jews in party and state positions. But the language evolves within days of invasion. Communist officials becomes all Jewish men of military age. Partisans becomes any Jew in regions where resistance occurs. The categories expand with practiced ease, each adjustment bringing more people within the killing mandate, until by late summer 1941, the Einsatzgruppen are shooting entire Jewish communities without bothering to distinguish ages or genders. Men, women, children, babies held by mothers, elderly unable to walk, all of them herded to ravines or forests, forced to undress, shot in groups, their bodies falling into mass graves. The massacre at Babi Yar outside Kiev occurs over 2 days in late September 1941. 33,771 Jews, the exact number recorded meticulously by Einsatzgruppen clerks, are marched to a ravine, forced to strip, shot in groups, their bodies tumbling into the gorge. It's the single largest massacre yet, the killing so continuous that relief teams replace shooters whose nerves or ammunition need replenishing. Local Ukrainian collaborators help with cordoning and logistics. Wehrmacht units provide security around the perimeter. The coordination between SS killers, local auxiliaries, and army support reveals how thoroughly genocide has become normalized within German occupation structures. Heinrich receives detailed reports of these operations, types summaries listing locations, dates, numbers killed, categorized by type. Jews, communists, partisans, Roma, mentally ill patients from Soviet asylums. The reports are filed, cross-referenced, compiled into summaries that climb the bureaucratic hierarchy until they reach his desk in Berlin. He reads them with the attention he brings to all documentation, occasionally querying details, noting places where procedures need refinement, but never questioning the fundamental mission. The numbers are staggering, even by the grim standards Poland established. Tens of thousands shot weekly, hundreds of thousands by year's end. In August 1941, Heinrich travels to the occupied Soviet Union to observe operations personally. He visits Minsk, where Einsatzgruppe has established operations. On August 15th, he witnesses an execution personally, watching as 100 Jews are shot into a prepared pit. His reaction is documented by multiple observers. His face turns pale. His hands shake. He nearly faints when brain matter from a shot victim splashes near his boots. Arthur Northeast by East, the Einsatzgruppe commander, steadies him. And Heinrich, recovering his composure, doesn't order the killing stopped. Instead, he speaks to the shooters about the difficulty of their task, acknowledging the psychological burden they carry, framing their actions as necessary sacrifice for Germanic future. But the witness of direct killing affects him differently than reading reports. That evening, he orders his commanders to find more humane methods, not for the victims, but for the killers. The psychological toll on SS men is unacceptable. Shooting women and children at close range is causing nervous breakdowns, alcoholism, mental collapse among executioners. Heinrich needs methods that create more distance between killer and victim, that allow murder without intimate confrontation. His concern isn't for the murdered. It's for the murderers, for maintaining their psychological fitness to continue operations at scale. The solution already exists in prototype. Mobile gas vans have been developed from T4 euthanasia program experience. Trucks modified, so exhaust fumes are piped into sealed cargo compartments. Victims are loaded inside, told they're being relocated, and asphyxiated during the drive to burial sites. The method is tested by Einsatzgruppe in Ukraine during autumn 1941. It works, technically, though loading capacity is limited and engine problems are common. But the psychological benefit is significant. Drivers and loaders never see victims die. The killing is mechanical, hidden, easier for perpetrators to rationalize, as simply following orders to drive trucks. By December 1941, approximately 500,000 Jews have been murdered in the occupied Soviet Union, killed by bullets and gas in operations that are systematic but still somewhat improvised. The Einsatzgruppen adapt methods based on local conditions. Sometimes they force Jewish councils and towns to assemble residents for what's claimed to be relocation. Sometimes they conduct surprise operations, sealing neighborhoods and executing everyone found. Sometimes they concentrate Jews temporarily before killing. Sometimes they shoot on the spot. What's consistent is the outcome. Jewish communities across German-occupied Soviet territory are being systematically annihilated. The massacres create practical problems that occupy Heinrich's administrative attention. The shootings are too public, witnessed by Wehrmacht soldiers, local populations, creating documentation that might prove embarrassing. The mass graves are poorly concealed, sometimes placed too near towns, producing groundwater contamination and stench. The psychological impact on killers remains concerning despite gas van introduction. And, fundamentally, shooting is too slow for the scope of murder Heinrich is beginning to envision. The Soviet Union holds millions of Jews. The current methods would require years of continuous killing to eliminate them all. Heinrich meets with Hitler multiple times during autumn 1941, though no written record documents what's discussed. But the circumstantial evidence suggests these meetings involve authorization for expanded killing. In July, Göring issues written authorization for Heydrich to develop a comprehensive solution to the Jewish question throughout German-controlled Europe. In October, Jewish immigration from German territory is forbidden, closing the theoretical escape route that previously existed. In November, construction begins on permanent killing facilities in occupied Poland, facilities whose purpose is unmistakably murder on industrial scale. The Wannsee Conference convenes in a villa on Berlin's outskirts on January 20th, 1942. Heydrich chairs the meeting, gathering representatives from various ministries to coordinate what's euphemistically called the final solution. 15 bureaucrats sit around a conference table eating breakfast, while Heydrich outlines plans to transport 11 million Jews from across Europe to death camps in Poland. The language is careful, speaking of evacuation and resettlement, but Heydrich makes the actual meaning clear. Those fit for labor will be worked to death. The rest will be killed immediately. This isn't policy proposal requiring approval. It's coordination meeting for genocide already underway. Heinrich doesn't attend Wannsee, but his authority saturates the conference. The SS will handle operations. The concentration camps will provide infrastructure. The Einsatzgruppen experience informs planning. His years of building bureaucratic systems for persecution are now being applied to extermination. The meeting produces a protocol, 16 pages of bureaucratic German documenting genocide with the emotional tone of industrial planning. Transportation schedules, labor allocation, definitions of who qualifies as Jewish. The mundane language obscures monumental evil, but that's exactly Heinrich's administrative style. Murder becomes manageable when framed as logistics. But Wannsee is coordination for decisions already made and operations already beginning. Chelmno, the first dedicated extermination camp, has been operating since December 1941 in occupied Poland. It uses gas vans to kill Jews from the Lodz ghetto and surrounding areas. Victims arrive by train or truck, are told they're going to labor camps, are loaded into vans, and die during the drive to forced burial sites. Approximately 1,000 people are murdered daily through winter and spring of 1942. It's still improvised compared to what's coming, but it represents crucial evolution. This isn't shooting Jews near their homes. This is transporting them to centralized killing facilities operated like factories. The major extermination camps begin construction through spring 1942. Belzec opens in March. Sobibor in May. Treblinka in July. These facilities serve single purpose: murder. There are no prisoner barracks because prisoners aren't meant to survive arrival. The camps are designed with deception in mind, false fronts, making them resemble transit facilities. Victims arrive by train, are told they need disinfection showers before continuing to labor camps, are herded into gas chambers disguised as bathrooms, and killed with carbon monoxide from diesel engines. The bodies are buried in mass graves, later burned when burial proves impractical. The victims' belongings are sorted and shipped to Germany. The process from arrival to death takes hours. Heinrich visits these facilities during their early operation, reviewing procedures, suggesting improvements. He's concerned about efficiency, about capacity, about maintaining secrecy. The camps are in remote locations, but local Polish populations can see trains arriving and smell the burning bodies. He orders better concealment, faster processing, more thorough destruction of evidence. The murder itself doesn't trouble him. The potential for documentation does. He's building something unprecedented and wants control over how history remembers it, if history remembers it at all. The genocide is now operating on two parallel tracks. The Einsatzgruppen continue shooting operations across occupied Soviet territory, their killing becoming more systematic as experience accumulates. Mobile gas vans supplement shooting where available. And in Poland, the extermination camps are beginning to operate at scale, receiving trainloads of Jews from ghettos throughout German-controlled territory. The two systems will eventually merge into the comprehensive apparatus centered on Auschwitz-Birkenau. But in spring 1942, they're still somewhat separate operations unified by Heinrich's overall command and shared purpose of eliminating European Jewry. The deportations from Western Europe begin during this period, revealing how thoroughly genocide has infected German administration. Jews in France, Belgium, Holland, Norway, everywhere German forces control territory, are required to register, where identifying stars, submit to increasing restrictions. Then the deportations start. Carefully worded announcements about resettlement in the East. Orders to report for labor service. Families boarding trains with permitted luggage, most genuinely believing they're being relocated to work camps. The trains travel east into Poland, arriving at Auschwitz or the extermination camps, where the vast majority are gassed within hours of arrival. The bureaucracy required for this continental-scale operation is massive. Railroad schedules coordinating thousands of deportation trains. Food and water provisions for transport. Payment arrangements between SS and German railways. Diplomatic negotiations with Allied and occupied governments. Confiscation procedures for victims' property. All of it documented, filed, processed through channels that involve thousands of German officials who know exactly what deportation to the East means. Heinrich has discovered that genocide requires not just killers but administrators, accountants, lawyers, clerks, all doing their small part in machinery too large for any individual to feel personally responsible. By the end of 1942, the Holocaust is fully operational. The Einsatzgruppen have murdered over 1 million Jews in the occupied Soviet Union. The extermination camps are killing thousands daily. The deportation system is transporting Jews from across Europe to their deaths. And Heinrich Himmler, sitting in his Berlin office reading reports, issuing orders, planning expansions, has achieved something historically unique. He's built and is operating a system for systematic murder on continental scale, killing not in the passion of battle or pogrom, but through bureaucratic process, turning genocide into industrial operation that functions with mechanical efficiency. His weak stomach still troubles him. His body remains fragile. But he's proven that physical weakness is irrelevant when you command institutions designed for murder. The machinery is working. The numbers are climbing. And Heinrich is already planning how to accelerate operations even further, how to eliminate not just Soviet and Polish Jews, but every Jewish person in territories Germany might conquer. The genocide that began with Einsatzgruppen shootings in June 1941 has transformed in 18 months into something unprecedented. An industrial system for extermination, operating according to schedules and quotas, turning humans into statistics and bodies into ash. Chapter 8. The Death Camp System, 1942 to 1943. The train slows as it approaches the platform at Auschwitz-Birkenau in July 1942. Inside the cattle cars, families who've traveled for days without water or toilets press against the walls, desperate for air through the small barred windows. They've been told they're being resettled in the East for labor service. Many still believe it. The doors slide open and SS guards shout orders in German that most don't understand. Families are separated on the platform. Men to one side, women and children to the other. An SS doctor, often Joseph Mengele, though others perform the same function, gestures left or right with casual movements of his hand. Left means immediate death in gas chambers disguised as showers. Right means temporary survival as slave labor. Most people don't realize they're being selected for execution. They simply follow the line they're directed toward, clutching children's hands, carrying the few possessions they were allowed to bring. Heinrich Himmler visits Auschwitz on July 17th and 18th, 1942, to observe the entire process from arrival to disposal. Camp Commandant Rudolf Haas has prepared for this inspection with characteristic German thoroughness. Everything is clean, organized, operating at maximum efficiency. Heinrich watches as a transport of Dutch Jews is processed. He sees the selection on the ramp, observes as those sent left are led toward the gas chambers, told to undress for disinfection, herded into the room disguised with fake shower heads. He watches as Zyklon B pellets are poured through roof vents, the prussic acid gas rising from the floor as the crystals react with air. He cannot see inside the sealed chamber, but he knows what's happening. The screaming that starts within seconds. The desperate clawing at walls and doors. The bodies piling near the vents where victims climbed seeking air that wasn't poisoned. Death within 15 to 20 minutes for everyone locked inside. After the gas chambers are ventilated, Heinrich observes the Sonderkommando, Jewish prisoners forced to work in the crematoria as they remove bodies. Gold teeth are extracted with pliers. Hair is cut from corpses for use in textiles. Bodies are loaded into crematorium ovens that run constantly, burning flesh and bone into ash later dumped in nearby rivers or used as fertilizer. The process from arrival to cremation takes roughly 2 to 3 hours. Haas proudly explains capacity. With current facilities, they can murder 2,000 people daily. Expansions under construction will increase this to 4,000, eventually 8,000. Heinrich nods, takes notes, asks technical questions about efficiency improvements. His reaction to witnessing industrial murder is satisfaction at operational effectiveness. That evening, Heinrich attends a reception at Haas's house, where he meets with senior SS officers administering the camp complex. They discuss challenges of scale, the crematorium capacity issues that necessitate open-air burning pits, the logistical problems of disposing victims' possessions, which arrive in such quantities they fill warehouses the SS calls Canada, named ironically for that nation's perceived wealth, the difficulty of maintaining secrecy when trains arrive daily from across Europe, and the smell of burning flesh hangs over the entire region. These are practical problems requiring administrative solutions, discussed over dinner with the same tone used for any business challenges. He gives a speech to the officers about the historical importance of their work. They are performing the hardest task in human history, he tells them, eliminating the Jewish threat to Germanic civilization. History may not understand their sacrifice, their willingness to do what's necessary regardless of personal cost. But the Führer knows. The SS knows. Germanic future depends on their ruthless execution of this mission. Its masterful manipulation, framing mass murder as noble sacrifice, transforming executioners into martyrs suffering for racial destiny. The officers absorb this ideology, using it to rationalize their participation in genocide. Auschwitz-Birkenau is the largest killing center, but not the only one operating at scale during 1942 and 43. The Action Reinhard camps, named after Heydrich, who was assassinated by Czech resistance in June 1942, are purpose-built for extermination. Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka exists solely to murder. They have no prisoner barracks because prisoners aren't meant to survive. Jews arrive, are killed within hours, their bodies burned, their possessions shipped to Germany. These camps are smaller than Auschwitz, but optimized for killing speed. Treblinka murders approximately 2,000 people daily during peak operations. The entire process from train arrival to cremation completed in under 3 hours. The deception required to operate these camps is elaborate and psychologically sophisticated. Victims must not realize they're being killed until too late to resist. Treblinka is designed to look like a train station, complete with fake clock and signs for waiting room and ticket office. Victims disembark thinking they've reached a transit point. They're told to shower before continuing to labor camps. The gas chambers are disguised as bathrooms, complete with fake shower heads. Only when the doors seal and gas pours in do they understand. By then, resistance is impossible. The rooms are packed too densely for movement. Death comes too quickly for organized opposition. The Sonderkommando units, Jewish prisoners forced to operate the killing facilities, face impossible moral horror. They must lead their own people into gas chambers, remove the bodies, extract gold teeth, cut hair from corpses, burn remains. If they refuse, they're killed immediately. If they comply, they survive a few more months before being executed and replaced to prevent witnesses. Some resist through small acts of sabotage, slowing operations where possible. Others maintain meticulous documentation, burying records they hope will eventually testify to what happened. Most simply try to survive each day, their minds breaking under the weight of forced participation in genocide. Heinrich receives regular reports on killing operations across all camps, detailed statistics documenting the pace of genocide. The reports use euphemistic language, special treatment instead of murder, evacuation instead of deportation, resettlement instead of extermination. But the numbers are precise. How many Jews arrived? How many were selected for labor? How many were subjected to special treatment? The bureaucratic language obscures reality, but Heinrich knows exactly what the numbers represent. He files the reports, studies trends, identifies bottlenecks requiring attention. Production is increasing, but not fast enough for his ambitions. The deportation system feeding the death camps operates across German-controlled Europe with chilling efficiency. In France, the Vichy government cooperates in rounding up Jews, initially foreign Jews to protect French citizens, but eventually all Jews regardless of citizenship. In Holland, Dutch police assist with arrests and deportations, functioning as accomplices to genocide. In Belgium, local authorities provide records identifying Jewish residents. The German administrative machine coordinates this continental operation, scheduling trains, allocating resources, negotiating with occupied governments, all to maintain steady flow of victims to Polish killing centers. The logistics are staggering. German Railways operates thousands of special trains for deportations, charging the SS per person per kilometer like commercial passengers. The bills are paid from confiscated Jewish property, meaning victims literally finance their own murder. Each train requires scheduling that doesn't interfere with military transport. Food and water must be provided, though minimally since most passengers will be dead within days of arrival. Guards must be assigned. Destinations confirmed. The complexity would be impressive if applied to any purpose other than genocide. The economic exploitation of victims is systematic and thorough. Everything taken from Jews is cataloged and redistributed. Clothing is cleaned and sent to German families bombed out by Allied air raids. Eyeglasses are distributed to German opticians. Watches, jewelry, and currency are converted to Reich funds. Even hair cut from corpses is woven into textiles. The SS operates this plunder economy through the SS Economic Administration Main Office, the WVCHE, which manages concentration camp labor and victim property with equal bureaucratic detachment. Heinrich has turned genocide into profitable enterprise, extracting economic value from murder. The camp system expands beyond extermination facilities to include vast networks of labor camps, where prisoners are worked to death slightly more slowly. Auschwitz itself is actually 3 camps. Auschwitz I, the original camp for political prisoners. Auschwitz II Birkenau, the extermination center with gas chambers. Auschwitz III Monowitz, a labor camp for IG Farben chemical production. Prisoners at Monowitz manufacture synthetic rubber and fuel, their labor rented to German corporations who profit from slavery, while knowing workers are systematically starved and worked to collapse. Heinrich tours various camps throughout 1943, inspecting operations, demanding improvements. At Mauthausen in Austria, he observes the stone quarry where prisoners are worked to death hauling rocks up steep steps. At Grossrosen, he reviews granite production from camp labor. At Mittelbau-Dora, prisoners are assembling V-2 rockets in underground factories, dying from exhaustion and beatings while producing weapons Hitler hopes will reverse German military fortunes. The camps have become essential to German war economy, providing slave labor for projects ranging from armaments to construction. His speeches to SS officers during this period reveal his psychology. He acknowledges the difficulty of their task, the psychological burden of killing. Most of you know what it means when 100 corpses lie together, when 500 lie there, or when 1,000 lie there, he tells assembled SS leaders in Posen in October 1943. To have gone through this, and yet to have remained decent, that has made us hard. This is a glorious page in our history that has never been written and shall never be written. He's framing genocide as secret glory, burden that proves SS superiority, sacrifice that history cannot acknowledge, but which ensures Germanic survival. The scale of killing during this period is difficult to comprehend. In 1942 alone, approximately 2.7 million Jews are murdered. The action Reinhard camps kill, roughly 1.7 million. Auschwitz accounts for hundreds of thousands more. The Einsatzgruppen continue operations in occupied Soviet territory. By the end of 1943, approximately 4 million Jews have been killed since the invasion of Soviet Union began in June 1941. The genocide is occurring at such scale that even Heinrich's meticulous documentation cannot fully capture it. Entire communities are erased, family lines extinguished, centuries of Jewish culture in Eastern Europe systematically destroyed. The resistance that does occur is brutally suppressed. The Treblinka uprising in August 1943 sees prisoners kill guards and set buildings ablaze. But most escapees are hunted down within days. The Sobibor revolt in October 1943 is more successful, with 300 prisoners escaping, though fewer than 50 survive the war. These uprisings lead to camp closures and evidence destruction. Treblinka is razed and planted with trees to disguise its existence. Sobibor is plowed under. The SS is trying to hide the crime, even as it continues elsewhere. Heinrich's personal life continues its strange compartmentalization. He maintains his marriage to Margaret, while living openly with his mistress Hedwig Pothist, who bears him a son in 1942. His daughter Gudrun visits him at field headquarters, completely unaware her father commands the machinery of genocide. He sends her affectionate letters, discussing her school performance and hobbies, then returns to reviewing reports on daily murder totals. The cognitive dissociation is complete. The loving father and the architect of Holocaust exist in the same body without apparent internal conflict. By the end of 1943, the death camp system is functioning at maximum capacity. Auschwitz can murder and cremate 8,000 people daily. The deportation network spans from Norway to Greece, from France to Hungary. The economic exploitation of victims generates millions in Reich funds. The secrecy, while imperfect, prevents full comprehension even among Germans who suspect something terrible is happening in the East. And Heinrich Himmler, sitting in his offices reviewing reports, planning expansions, issuing orders, has achieved something historically unprecedented. He's built and is operating an industrial system for human extermination, killing millions through bureaucratic process, turning genocide into routine administrative function performed by thousands of ordinary Germans and collaborators across occupied Europe. The machinery he spent a decade building is now operating at full capacity, consuming lives with mechanical efficiency that transforms horror into statistics, humans into units processed and disposed of according to schedules and quotas that exist only to measure death. Chapter 9. Empire of Blood, 1942 to 1943. Heinrich Himmler stands at the peak of his power in 1943, commanding an empire that would have been unimaginable a decade earlier. His authority extends across occupied Europe like a vast spiderweb, each strand connecting back to offices in Berlin, where clerks type orders that determine life and death for millions. The concentration camp system he designed now holds over 700,000 prisoners across hundreds of camps and subcamps. The Waffen-SS has expanded to over 500,000 soldiers fighting on every front. The Gestapo operates from offices in every occupied city. The SD intelligence network penetrates resistance movements, foreign governments, even the Wehrmacht itself. And over all of it, reviewing reports, issuing directives, planning expansions, sits the man who failed as a chicken farmer but succeeded in building the most efficient killing apparatus in human history. The morning routine in Heinrich's Berlin headquarters reveals the bureaucratic nature of his empire. Reports arrive from across occupied Europe before breakfast. Overnight arrest totals from France. Deportation schedules from Holland. Labor allocation figures from Auschwitz. Partisan suppression operations in Yugoslavia. Waffen-SS casualty reports from the Eastern Front. Each document is filed, cataloged, cross-referenced. Heinrich reviews them methodically, his weak eyes scanning columns of numbers that represent human suffering rendered into statistics. A clerk notes his decisions. Orders are typed, distributed through channels that transform his instructions into actions 1,000 miles away. A stroke of his pen means arrest in Paris. A signature means death in Warsaw. A notation means transport to Auschwitz. The SS budget for 1943 exceeds 600 million Reichsmarks, not including income from confiscated property and prisoner labor that adds hundreds of millions more. Heinrich administers this fortune through the WVHA, the Economic Administration Main Office, which manages everything from concentration camp operations to SS business enterprises. The German Earth and Stone Works Company exploits camp labor in quarries across occupied territory. The German Equipment Works manufactures goods using prisoner workers. The Society for the Support and Care of SS Members manages welfare for SS families. Heinrich has built not just a military and police organization, but a complete economic system that profits from slavery and murder. The concentration camps under his command in 1943 number over 1,000 sites when all subcamps are counted. The major complexes like Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Dachau, Mauthausen serve as hubs for satellite camps scattered around them. Prisoners are distributed based on economic needs. Those with technical skills go to armaments production. The strong are sent to construction projects. The weak are worked to death in quarries. Jews are killed immediately unless selected for temporary labor exploitation. The entire system operates according to racial hierarchy Heinrich has spent years codifying. Aryans receive better treatment than Slavs. Slavs are valued more than Jews. Jews are considered expendable, their lives measured only in temporary labor value before inevitable extermination. The Waffen-SS has evolved from Hitler's bodyguard into a military force fighting across all fronts. 20 divisions are operational by mid-1943, some of them among the most effective units in German service. The 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandard Adolf Hitler fights in Russia, France, the Balkans, earning reputation for battlefield effectiveness and war crimes. The Das Reich Division murders 642 French civilians in Ordre-sur-Glane in June 1944. The Totenkopf Division, formed from concentration camp guards, brings camp brutality to the battlefield, routinely executing prisoners and massacring civilians. Heinrich views Waffen-SS combat performance as proof that racial ideology produces superior soldiers, that men selected for genetic purity and indoctrinated with SS values fight harder than conventional troops. But the military SS serves another function beyond combat. It provides trained manpower for operations requiring military skills but criminal purpose. Waffen-SS units participate in partisan suppression operations that are really genocide under military cover. They conduct anti-partisan sweeps in Belarus and Ukraine that systematically massacre Jewish populations under pretense of security operations. They staff the Einsatzgruppen that follow front lines, shooting civilians. They guard concentration camps between combat rotations. The line between soldier and executioner is deliberately blurred, creating a force that can transition seamlessly between battlefield combat and genocidal murder. The intelligence apparatus Heinrich commands through the SD and Gestapo penetrates every corner of occupied Europe and much of Germany itself. Informant networks report on resistance activities, black market operations, defeatist conversations, jokes about Hitler, any sign of opposition or doubt. The Gestapo arrests approximately 150,000 Germans during the war years for political crimes, many based on denunciations from neighbors or co-workers. The terror is internalized, making every conversation dangerous, every expression of doubt potentially fatal. Heinrich has created an atmosphere where surveillance is assumed, where people censor themselves because they cannot know who might report them. The foreign intelligence operations are less successful, but reveal Heinrich's ambitions. He attempts to run agents in Britain, the Soviet Union, the United States. Most are caught or prove ineffective, but the attempts demonstrate his vision of SS dominance extending beyond military occupation into global intelligence competition. He's particularly interested in Soviet intelligence methods, studying NKVD techniques, incorporating what he considers effective into SS operations. The rivalry with the Wehrmacht military intelligence leads to constant jurisdictional battles that Heinrich usually wins through superior access to Hitler. His headquarters staff numbers in the thousands by 1943, bureaucrats administering the machinery of occupation and genocide. The Reich main security office on Prinz Albrechtstrasse in Berlin houses departments managing everything from counterintelligence to Jewish affairs to capture document analysis. Clerks type reports on Jewish deportations between lunch breaks. Analysts study resistance movements in air-conditioned offices. Budget officers calculate the cost per prisoner per day in concentration camps, seeking efficiency improvements. The banality is extraordinary. Genocide administered with the same bureaucratic procedures used for any government function, processed through channels that distribute responsibility so widely that individuals can claim they were merely following orders or processing paperwork. The racial policies Heinrich has championed since the 1920s are now implemented across occupied Europe, with varying degrees of cooperation from local populations. In Norway, the Lebensborn program establishes homes for children born to Norwegian women and German soldiers, attempting to harvest Nordic genetic material. In Poland, German settlers occupy farms seized from murdered or expelled Poles. Colonization justified through racial ideology, claiming Slavs are subhuman. In occupied Soviet territory, German civil administrators implement starvation policies that kill millions, viewing Soviet citizens as expendable populations whose deaths create living space for future German settlement. The Germanization programs reveal the full scope of Heinrich's racial engineering ambitions. Children who appear sufficiently Nordic are kidnapped from occupied territories and placed with German families, their identities erased, their origins hidden. Approximately 200,000 children are stolen this way, primarily from Poland and Soviet territories, subjected to Germanization process that's essentially cultural genocide. Heinrich personally reviews reports on these programs, satisfied that genetic material considered valuable is being recovered for the Reich, even as entire populations are marked for elimination. His relationship with Hitler remains central to maintaining his empire. He meets with the Führer regularly, provides intelligence briefings, reports on SS operations, receives authorization for expanded actions. Hitler trusts Heinrich absolutely, viewing him as the most loyal of all subordinates, the one man whose obedience is unconditional. This trust grants Heinrich enormous autonomy in implementing racial policy. Hitler provides broad direction but leaves details to Heinrich, who translates ideological vision into operational reality. The result is genocide that Hitler desires, but Heinrich organizes, a partnership where one provides purpose and the other provides method. But cracks are appearing in the empire by late 1943. The military situation is deteriorating. Stalingrad has been lost. North Africa is gone. Sicily has fallen. Allied bombing is destroying German cities. The Wehrmacht is retreating on all fronts. Heinrich's Waffen-SS divisions fight harder than ever, but courage cannot overcome industrial and numerical superiority the Allies are bringing to bear. The concentration camps are overcrowded as partisan suppression operations and intensified persecution fill them beyond capacity. Disease is killing prisoners faster than gas chambers in some locations. Food shortages mean even prisoners selected for labor are dying before their work value is extracted. The genocide continues at maximum pace despite these challenges. Hungarian Jews, protected until now by their government's autonomy, face deportation beginning in spring 1944. 437,000 Hungarian Jews will be transported to Auschwitz between May and July 1944, most gassed immediately upon arrival. It's the largest and fastest deportation operation of the entire Holocaust, demonstrating that even as Germany loses the war, the machinery Heinrich built continues operating with mechanical efficiency. Killing Jews takes priority over military logistics. Trains needed for troop transport are diverted to deportations. Resources required at the front are spent on genocide. Heinrich's speeches during this period reveal psychology bordering on delusion. He tells SS audiences that they will still win the war through superiority of will, that secret weapons under development will turn the tide, that the Aryan spirit cannot be defeated by materially superior but racially inferior enemies. He's constructing a narrative where defeat is impossible because racial ideology promises Germanic triumph. Reality doesn't matter when belief is absolute. His audiences, facing daily evidence of impending catastrophe, desperately want to believe him. The alternative is confronting that their crimes will go unpunished only if Germany wins, and Germany is losing. The empire's administration reveals contradictions Heinrich cannot resolve. The concentration camps are simultaneously extermination facilities and labor reservoirs. Prisoners are both worthless subhumans requiring elimination and valuable workers needed for war production. The policies conflict, with camp commandants receiving orders to maximize both deaths and labor output. Some camps emphasize extermination. Others focus on exploitation. Auschwitz attempts both, gassing most arrivals while working survivors to death. The result is operational chaos disguised by bureaucratic language claiming efficiency. His personal life grows more complex and strange. Margaret remains his legal wife in Bavaria. Hedwig and their children live in Berchtesgaden. He visits both households irregularly, maintaining dual family structures that mirror his capacity for compartmentalization. His health deteriorates under stress. Chronic stomach problems worsen. Headaches plague him. He consults doctors constantly, tries various diets and medications, none providing lasting relief. His body is breaking under the weight of responsibility for administering genocide, but his mind refuses to acknowledge that what he's doing might be fundamentally wrong. By the end of 1943, Heinrich Himmler commands the largest police state in history. His SS numbers over 800,000 men. His concentration camps hold 750,000 prisoners. His Einsatzgruppen and extermination facilities have murdered approximately 4 million Jews. His economic empire extracts billions in value from confiscated property and slave labor. His intelligence networks penetrate resistance movements across occupied Europe. His authority is second only to Hitler, and in some domains exceeds even the Führer's direct involvement. He's achieved everything he dreamed of when he joined the Nazi Party 20 years earlier. He's proven that obsessive organization combined with absolute ruthlessness can accomplish anything, that the weak-bodied bureaucrat can command empires if he's willing to embrace his hatred completely. But the empire is beginning to crumble at its edges, and Heinrich, reviewing his reports in Berlin, cannot quite admit what the statistics are revealing. That Germany is losing, that the Allies are coming, that all his files and records and meticulous documentation will eventually testify against him, that the machinery he built for genocide will be turned off not by his orders, but by military defeat, that history will remember him not as the savior of the Aryan race, but as architect of history's greatest crime. Chapter 10. Crumbling Empire, 1943 to 1944. The Red Army liberates Kiev on November 6, 1943, and the strategic implications echo through SS headquarters in Berlin like the first crack in a dam about to collapse. Soviet forces are advancing westward, reclaiming territory where Heinrich's Einsatzgruppen murdered hundreds of thousands. The mass graves at Babi Yar, at Ponary, at thousands of other killing sites lie in the path of Soviet advance. Evidence of genocide is about to fall into enemy hands. Heinrich issues urgent orders through secure channels. Destroy the evidence. Dig up the graves. Burn the bodies. Leave nothing for the Soviets to find. What follows is called Action 1005, a massive operation to exhume and cremate hundreds of thousands of corpses before the Red Army arrives. Special units, many composed of Jewish prisoners forced to participate in destroying evidence of their own people's murder, are deployed to killing sites across occupied Soviet territory. They dig up mass graves using excavators, stack decomposing bodies on massive pyres constructed from railway ties and logs, burn them with gasoline until nothing remains but bone fragments, which are then crushed and scattered. The scale is staggering. At Babi Yar alone, they exhume and burn approximately 33,000 bodies over several weeks. The air fills with smoke and the sickening smell of burning human remains. Local populations watch from a distance, understanding exactly what's being destroyed. The prisoners doing this work know they'll be killed once the job is finished to eliminate witnesses. Most are executed as Soviet forces approach. The Warsaw Ghetto uprising erupts on April 19, 1943, when Jewish resistance fighters open fire on German troops, attempting to begin final deportations. Heinrich has been preparing to liquidate the Warsaw Ghetto, where approximately 60,000 Jews remain after previous deportations, to Treblinka murdered most of the original population. But the remaining inhabitants, knowing deportation means death, have been preparing resistance. They've smuggled weapons, built bunkers and tunnels, organized fighting groups. When the SS enters to begin deportations, they face armed opposition for the first time. Heinrich is furious. Jews resisting the SS contradicts everything his racial ideology promises. Jews are supposed to be weak, incapable of organized resistance. He orders Jürgen Stroop, the SS officer commanding the operation, to destroy the ghetto completely. What follows is a 4-week battle where German forces systematically burn the ghetto block by block, using flamethrowers and explosives to clear buildings, shooting anyone who emerges. The Jewish fighters hold out with incredible courage, killing dozens of Germans before being overwhelmed by firepower and numbers. On May 16th, Stroop dynamites the Great Synagogue as a symbolic act marking the ghetto's destruction. 7,000 Jews are killed during the fighting. The survivors are deported to death camps. Stroop prepares a bound report for Heinrich documenting the operation with grotesque pride. The Stroop report includes daily summaries, casualty figures, photographs of burning buildings, and captured fighters. The title page announces the Jewish quarter of Warsaw is no more. Heinrich reviews this document with satisfaction, viewing the ghetto's destruction as a necessary example to prevent similar resistance elsewhere. But the uprising has revealed something terrifying for the SS. Jews, when faced with certain death, will fight rather than submit to deportation. The illusion of orderly genocide is shattered. In October 1943, Heinrich travels to Posen to address assembled SS leadership, giving speeches that are recorded and will later serve as damning evidence at Nuremberg. He speaks openly about the extermination of Jews, breaking the careful euphemistic language usually employed. Most of you will know what it means when 100 bodies lie together, when there are 500, or when there are 1,000. And to have seen this through, and, apart from a few exceptions due to human weakness, to have remained decent, that has made us hard. He's telling his officers directly that they're murdering Jews, acknowledging it as the hardest task in history, framing it as glorious sacrifice that future generations will never be told about, but which ensures Germanic survival. The speech reveals Heinrich's psychology completely. He knows the genocide is indefensible by conventional morality, which is why he insists it must remain secret. He knows his men are struggling psychologically with what they're doing, which is why he frames it as necessary hardship proving their superiority. He knows that history might judge them harshly, which is why he claims their actions are a glorious page that shall never be written. It's the worldview of a man so committed to ideology that he's willing to commit crimes of such magnitude they require eternal secrecy, yet simultaneously believes these crimes prove his movement's worthiness. The military situation deteriorates throughout 1944 with accelerating speed. The Allies land in Normandy on June 6th. Soviet forces launch Operation Bagration on June 23rd, destroying German Army Group Center and liberating Belarus. Romania switches sides in August, opening the Balkans to Soviet advance. Finland exits the war. Hungary, Germany's last significant ally, attempts to negotiate separate peace before being occupied by German forces. The Reich is collapsing from all directions, and Heinrich's SS divisions are fighting desperate defensive battles on every front. In this context of impending defeat, the Hungarian deportations begin in May 1944, representing the Holocaust's final massive killing operation. Hungary's Jewish population of 800,000 has survived until now because the Hungarian government resisted German pressure for deportation. But after Germany occupies Hungary in March to prevent defection, Adolf Eichmann arrives with deportation specialists and experience from every previous operation. The system Heinrich has perfected over 3 years is applied with maximum efficiency. Hungarian authorities cooperate fully. The deportation trains run on time. Between May 15th and July 9th, approximately 437,000 Hungarian Jews are deported, mostly to Auschwitz, where the gas chambers and crematoria operate 24 hours daily to handle the influx. The speed is extraordinary. At peak operation, 12,000 Jews arrive at Auschwitz daily from Hungary. Most are gassed immediately, the selection process reducing time between train arrival and death to under 3 hours. The crematoria cannot keep pace with the killing, forcing use of open-air burning pits where bodies are stacked on wooden pyres and burned continuously. The Sonderkommando prisoners forced to operate the gas chambers and crematoria are themselves being murdered and replaced regularly to prevent witnesses surviving. Some manage to take photographs secretly, burying them in containers, creating visual evidence of genocide that will be discovered after liberation. Heinrich visits Auschwitz again during this period, reviewing operations, demanding maximum efficiency. But he's simultaneously beginning to contemplate Germany's possible defeat and what that means for him personally. He starts making cautious, unauthorized peace feelers through neutral intermediaries, testing whether the Western Allies might negotiate separately from the Soviet Union. He's delusional enough to imagine he might be treated as a legitimate negotiating partner rather than war criminal, that his authority over SS and police might give him bargaining value. The approaches go nowhere. The Allies have committed to unconditional surrender and have no interest in talking to the architect of genocide. In July 1944, Hitler appoints Heinrich to command Army Group Upper Rhine after conspirators attempt to assassinate the Führer on July 20th. The appointment is absurd. Heinrich has no military training or combat experience. His brief command of Army Group Vistula in early 1945 will be catastrophic, his tactical incompetence contributing to German defeats. But in summer 1944, Hitler still trusts Heinrich absolutely, viewing SS loyalty as more important than military competence. The failed assassination attempt, carried out by Wehrmacht officers, confirms Hitler's paranoia about the army and reinforces his reliance on SS. The concentration camp system begins to collapse under the pressure of approaching Allied forces. As Soviet armies advance through Poland, Heinrich orders camps evacuated rather than allowing prisoners to be liberated. What follows are death marches, forced evacuations where tens of thousands of prisoners are marched westward in winter without adequate food, clothing, or shelter. Those who cannot keep pace are shot and left beside roads. The marches from Auschwitz in January 1945 involve approximately 60,000 prisoners. 15,000 died during the march. Similar evacuations occur from camps throughout Poland and Germany, killing prisoners who survived years of camp brutality only to die weeks before liberation. The evidence destruction continues desperately throughout this period. Crematoria at Auschwitz are demolished in November 1944. Camp records are burned. Gas chambers are blown up. Heinrich orders all traces of extermination operations eliminated before Allied arrival. But the scale of genocide makes complete destruction impossible. Too many killing sites. Too many mass graves. Too many witnesses still alive despite SS efforts to murder them all. The evidence survives Heinrich's attempts to erase it. His final speeches to SS officers combine delusion and desperation. He insists Germany will still win through miracle weapons, that the V-2 rockets will break British morale, that new jet aircraft will sweep Allied bombers from the skies, that divisions promised by Hitler will counterattack and reverse all defeats. None of this is real. The miracle weapons are too few and too late. The promised divisions don't exist. But Heinrich needs to believe because the alternative is accepting that everything he's built, all the crimes he's committed, have been for nothing. That Germany will lose, and he will face justice. By late 1944, the disconnect between Heinrich's rhetoric and reality is complete. He's commanding phantom armies that exist only on maps. He's issuing orders to units already destroyed. He's planning operations with resources that don't exist. His empire is collapsing not from internal weakness, but from external military defeat. The concentration camps are being overrun. The Einsatzgruppen killing units have retreated back into Germany. The Waffen-SS divisions are being destroyed in battles they cannot win. The entire apparatus he spent 15 years building is falling apart, and he's powerless to prevent it. The SS loyalty he's cultivated begins to fracture under pressure. Officers start planning escape routes, securing false papers, moving wealth to neutral countries. Some commit suicide rather than face capture. Others begin destroying records that link them to specific crimes. The myth of SS invincibility, the racial superiority Heinrich preached for years, dissolves when confronted with military defeat. His officers are discovering they're not Germanic supermen, but criminals facing justice, and their only hope is escape or death. Heinrich himself begins the transformation from architect of genocide to fugitive from justice. He still appears at meetings, still issues orders, still maintains the facade of authority. But privately he's securing escape plans, preparing false documents, considering how to disappear when the Reich finally collapses. He cannot imagine accepting responsibility for his crimes, cannot conceive of standing trial for genocide. In his mind, he's been performing necessary service to Germanic civilization, sacrificing his humanity for racial survival. That history might judge him a monster rather than martyr is psychologically impossible for him to accept. The year 1944 ends with Germany surrounded, its cities burning, its armies retreating on all fronts. Heinrich's empire of terror is being systematically dismantled by advancing Allied forces. The concentration camps he built are becoming evidence against him. The mass graves his units tried to erase are being discovered. The survivors his SS tried to murder are living witnesses. Everything he constructed to implement genocide is now testifying to his crimes. And Heinrich Himmler, sitting in offices that might be bombed any night, reviewing reports of defeats he cannot prevent, issuing orders that cannot be executed, faces a future he spent his entire adult life trying to create, but which has become his approaching doom. The machinery is breaking. The empire is crumbling. And the architect of the Holocaust is running out of time, territory, and delusions that might shield him from the judgment that's coming with every mile the Allied armies advance. Chapter 11. The End Game, 1944 to 1945. The Auschwitz crematoria fall silent on November 25, 1944. Heinrich orders the gassing operation stopped, not from moral awakening, but from pragmatic calculation that the war is lost and evidence must be destroyed. The gas chambers are dismantled. The crematoria are blown up. Prisoners are forced to level the ruins and plant grass over the rubble. But the killing doesn't stop. It simply transforms. Prisoners too weak to evacuate are shot. Those selected for death marches face slower execution through exposure, starvation, and bullets for anyone who falls behind. The Holocaust continues even as its industrial infrastructure is demolished, murder becoming more chaotic, but no less deadly, as the Reich enters its final months. The death marches begin in earnest in January 1945, as Soviet forces approach camps throughout Poland. Approximately 60,000 prisoners are evacuated from Auschwitz alone, forced to march westward through snow and ice without adequate clothing or food. SS guards shoot anyone who cannot maintain the pace. Bodies line the roads, left where they fall. Similar evacuations occur from Grossrosen, Stutthof, Sachsenhausen, every camp in the path of Allied advance. Heinrich orders these evacuations personally, insisting that prisoners cannot be allowed to fall into enemy hands as witnesses. He's simultaneously murdering evidence and the evidence itself, killing those who survived years of camp hell specifically to prevent their testimony. But Heinrich is also attempting something extraordinary in its delusion. He's negotiating with the Allies while continuing genocide. Through Count Folke Bernadotte, vice president of the Swedish Red Cross, he makes contact with Western powers in February 1945. The proposals are fantastical. He offers to halt executions of Western Allied prisoners of war in exchange for separate peace with Britain and America. He suggests releasing small numbers of concentration camp prisoners as gestures of goodwill. He's convinced he can negotiate from a position of strength despite commanding a collapsing empire, that his control over prisoners gives him leverage, that the Western Allies might value his anti-communism enough to overlook his crimes. The negotiations reveal Heinrich's complete detachment from reality. He genuinely believes the Western Allies will accept him as a legitimate partner against the Soviet Union. He cannot comprehend that to Churchill and Roosevelt, he's not a potential ally, but a criminal who must face justice. His ideology has so thoroughly shaped his perception that he imagines his racial theories and anti-communist credentials might outweigh the small matter of murdering 6 million Jews. Count Bernadotte, who meets with Heinrich multiple times, later describes him as increasingly desperate, sweating profusely during meetings, his hands trembling, his eyes darting nervously, clearly aware his world is ending, but unable to accept responsibility for why. Through March and April 1945, Heinrich releases small groups of prisoners to neutral countries, attempting to create evidence of humanitarian concern. Several hundred Scandinavian prisoners are transferred to Sweden. A few thousand Western European prisoners are moved to better conditions. These gestures are cynical manipulation, last-minute attempt to create witnesses who might testify that he showed mercy. But the death marches continue simultaneously. Tens of thousands die during evacuations, even as Heinrich pretends to be concerned about prisoner welfare. The contradictions don't register. In his mind, selectively sparing hundreds while killing thousands is evidence of restraint rather than damning proof of deliberate genocide. The military situation deteriorates into complete catastrophe. Soviet forces encircle Berlin in April. American and British armies advance from the west. Germany is being crushed between two massive forces, territory shrinking daily. Heinrich's last military command, Army Group Vistula, has been a disaster. His tactical incompetence contributed to German defeats and cost thousands of lives. Hitler finally removes him from military command in March, though he retains his SS and police authority. But that authority is increasingly theoretical. Communications are breaking down. Units are surrendering or fleeing. The chain of command is dissolving as Germany enters its death throes. On April 20th, 1945, Hitler's birthday, Heinrich meets with the Führer for what will be their final encounter. The meeting occurs in Hitler's bunker beneath Berlin as Soviet artillery pounds the city above. Hitler is a physical wreck, aged beyond his 56 years, trembling with Parkinson's symptoms, convinced that betrayal explains all defeats. Heinrich assures him of SS loyalty, of continued resistance, of ultimate victory through will alone. Neither man acknowledges that these are lies. They've spent too many years believing their own propaganda to admit the truth now. The meeting ends with expressions of mutual devotion that both probably understand are final. But Heinrich is already pursuing his unauthorized negotiations with increasing desperation. On April 23rd, he meets Count Bernadotte at the Swedish consulate in Lübeck and makes an extraordinary proposal. He offers Germany's unconditional surrender to the Western Allies while continuing to fight the Soviet Union in the East. It's the same delusional thinking that's characterized his recent actions, the belief that anti-communism might excuse genocide, that the Western powers will accept him as partner against Stalin. Bernadotte transmits the offer to the Swedish Foreign Ministry, which passes it to the Allies. The response is immediate and unequivocal. No separate peace. Germany must surrender unconditionally to all Allies simultaneously. Heinrich Himmler has no authority to negotiate and will be arrested as a war criminal when captured. The news of Heinrich's unauthorized negotiations reaches Hitler on April 28th. Reuters news service reports the peace feeler, and someone brings a report to the bunker. Hitler's reaction is volcanic fury beyond anything witnesses have seen before. Himmler, his most loyal follower, the man he trusted absolutely, has committed the ultimate betrayal. Hitler, in one of his final acts before suicide, strips Heinrich of all rank, offices, and party membership. Orders are issued for his arrest. Heinrich is now an enemy of the Reich he helped build, a traitor to the Führer he worshipped. The irony is probably lost on both men. Heinrich betrayed Hitler through unauthorized peace negotiations. Hitler built an empire on betrayal and mass murder. Hitler commits suicide on April 30th. Admiral Karl Dönitz becomes Reich president of what remains of Germany, which by this point is isolated pockets of territory holding out against inevitable surrender. Heinrich travels to Dönitz's headquarters in Flensburg, hoping to secure a position in the transitional government. The meeting is awkward and brief. Dönitz wants nothing to do with him. The SS chief has no role in a government attempting to negotiate surrender. Heinrich is dismissed, told to go into hiding. He's politically radioactive, too notorious to be useful, his name synonymous with Nazi terror. Even the dying Reich doesn't want him. The death marches continue through the final days of April and early May, and final act of pointless murder. Bergen-Belsen, liberated by British forces on April 15th, contains 13,000 unburied corpses and 60,000 starving prisoners, many dying daily from typhus and malnutrition, even after liberation. Dachau, liberated by Americans on April 29th, holds 32,000 prisoners in conditions of indescribable horror. The liberating soldiers are so shocked by what they find that some execute SS guards on the spot. The newsreel footage and photographs taken at liberated camps will introduce the world to the Holocaust reality, images of skeletal survivors, and piles of bodies that make denial impossible. Heinrich knows what liberation means for him personally. The evidence is being discovered. The witnesses are surviving. The documentation he kept so meticulously is falling into Allied hands. He grows a mustache, removes his SS uniform for a Wehrmacht disguise, acquires false papers identifying him as Heinrich Himmler, a member of the secret field police. He's attempting to disappear into the chaos of Germany's collapse, to blend with millions of displaced persons, prisoners of war, and refugees flooding the roads. But he's too recognizable. Too many people know his face. and he lacks the ruthless survival instinct that might allow genuine escape. Germany surrenders unconditionally on May 8, 1945. The war in Europe is over. The Reich that was supposed to last 1,000 years has survived just 12. Heinrich is now a fugitive in occupied territory, traveling with a small group of SS officers who still maintain the fiction of loyalty. They're heading toward Bavaria, planning to hide in the mountains, perhaps attempting to reach the Austrian border. The planning is vague because the situation is hopeless. British and American forces control all of Western Germany. Soviet forces control the East. There's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. On May 21st, the group encounters a British checkpoint near Bremervord. They're traveling with forged papers, disguised as discharged Wehrmacht soldiers. The British are screening all military-age German men, looking for wanted war criminals and SS members whose identities they could determine through tattoos, documents, or recognition. Heinrich's group is detained for questioning. Initially, they're processed as ordinary prisoners of war, but something raises suspicion. Perhaps Heinrich's bearing, too authoritative for a common soldier. Perhaps the quality of his uniform despite the removed insignia. Perhaps one of his companions acts nervously. The British separate him for additional screening. He's taken to a processing camp at Barnstedt, where a British officer named Captain Tom Sylvester interviews him. Heinrich still maintains his cover identity as Heinrich Hitzing, but Sylvester is suspicious. The prisoner's demeanor doesn't match his claimed rank. His hands are too soft for someone who supposedly served in the field police. When asked to remove an eye patch he's wearing as part of his disguise, Heinrich's face becomes recognizable. Sylvester suddenly realizes who he's captured. This isn't a Wehrmacht sergeant. This is Heinrich Himmler, the second most wanted Nazi after Hitler, the architect of the Holocaust, the man responsible for the deaths of millions. Sylvester calls for superior officers immediately. A medical examination is ordered to check for suicide devices, but it's already too late. As medical personnel move to examine him, Heinrich bites down on a cyanide capsule hidden in his mouth, concealed there specifically for this moment. The glass breaks. The poison acts within seconds. He collapses, his body convulsing. British officers desperately try to save him, not for mercy, but because they need him alive for interrogation and trial. They turn him upside down, trying to drain the poison. A doctor attempts to induce vomiting. Nothing works. Within 15 minutes of being identified, Heinrich Himmler is dead at age 44, his crimes unpunished, his victims without the justice of watching him face judgment. The British photograph his body extensively, documenting his death to prevent future conspiracy theories that he escaped. The images show a weak-faced man with a small mustache, looking older than his years, nothing physically impressive or commanding. It's difficult to reconcile this ordinary-looking corpse with the magnitude of horror it commanded. But that's exactly Heinrich's legacy. He proved that extraordinary evil doesn't require extraordinary people. That systematic murder can be administered by bureaucrats in offices. That genocide can be organized by men with weak stomachs and mediocre abilities if they're willing to subordinate every human instinct to ideology. His body is buried in an unmarked grave somewhere on the Lüneburg Heath. The British never reveal the exact location, fearing it might become a shrine for neo-Nazis. The man who obsessed over documentation, who filed and cataloged everything, who believed paperwork was power, disappears into an anonymous grave without marker or memorial. The empire he built is destroyed. The systems he created for persecution and murder are being documented by Allied investigators who will use his own meticulous records to prosecute the surviving perpetrators. The genocide he organized killed approximately 6 million Jews, hundreds of thousands of Roma, millions of Soviet prisoners of war, hundreds of thousands of others deemed racially or politically unacceptable. The scale is so vast that comprehension is nearly impossible. The documents survive him. The Posen speeches are recovered, recorded evidence of him openly discussing genocide. The mountains of records from concentration camps, from the RSHA, from Einsatzgruppen reports, all of it falls into Allied hands. His obsessive documentation, meant to demonstrate efficiency and control, instead provides detailed evidence of systematic murder. At Nuremberg, prosecutors will use Heinrich's own files to prove the Holocaust, to demonstrate that genocide wasn't chaos but organized policy implemented through bureaucratic channels. The paperwork he trusted becomes the testimony that would have convicted him if he'd lived to stand trial. Everything he built to implement genocide serves after his death to document it, ensuring that history remembers exactly what he did and how he did it. The weak-bodied bureaucrat who dreamed of becoming a soldier became instead the architect of industrial murder, proving that the capacity for monstrous evil exists not in demons, but in ordinary humans willing to embrace their worst impulses and organize them with bureaucratic efficiency. Chapter 12. Capture and Death, May 1945. The interrogation room at the British processing camp in Barnstedt falls silent after Heinrich Himmler's body stops convulsing. Captain Tom Sylvester stands over the corpse of the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany, dead from cyanide poisoning before the British could extract a single useful word. The scene is chaotic. Medical personnel who attempted resuscitation step back from the body. Guards who rushed in at the commotion stand uncertainly, weapons drawn against a threat that's already eliminated itself. A photographer is called to document everything, the British command structure immediately understanding that this death will require extensive verification. The man who organized the murder of millions has escaped earthly justice through a glass capsule hidden in his mouth for precisely this moment. The British search his body thoroughly, finding 2 additional cyanide capsules sewn into his clothing, insurance against capture that he planned with the same obsessive attention to detail he brought to everything. His pockets contain the forged identity papers claiming he's Heinrich Himmler, a notebook with addresses, most of them now meaningless as the people are either dead or scattered. Some personal items of no intelligence value. Nothing that explains how one of the most recognizable faces in Nazi Germany thought he could disappear in a post-war chaos. Perhaps he believed his own propaganda about German superiority extending even to evading capture. Perhaps he simply had no other option and clung to desperate hope, because the alternative was facing what he'd done. The body is photographed from every angle, the images showing a remarkably ordinary-looking man. Without the SS uniform and insignia, without the trappings of power and authority, Heinrich Himmler is just a middle-aged German with weak features and poor eyesight who happened to command an empire of terror. The disconnect between appearance and actions is profound. This unremarkable corpse organized the systematic murder of 6 million Jews, the deaths of millions of Soviet prisoners of war, the enslavement of countless others in concentration camps. Evil, it turns out, doesn't require impressive physical presence. It requires only opportunity, ideology, and the willingness to subordinate every human instinct to bureaucratic process. British intelligence officers arrive within hours to examine the scene and secure whatever documents might have intelligence value. They're furious that Himmler died before interrogation. The information he possessed about Nazi operations, about SS structure, about war crimes across occupied Europe, all of it died with him. The suicide is particularly galling because the British were so close to preventing it. If they'd searched him more thoroughly immediately upon suspicion, if they'd restrained him before attempting examination, if the medical officer had acted seconds faster. But Heinrich planned his suicide carefully, keeping the capsule position where he could access it instantly, biding down the moment he understood capture was irreversible. The death is announced publicly on May 23, 1945. British officials release photographs proving the corpse is genuinely Heinrich Himmler, forestalling any rumors of escape. The images circulate through newspapers worldwide, giving the global audience their first clear look at the architect of the Holocaust. Reactions are mixed. Some feel cheated that he escaped trial and execution. Others are satisfied he's dead regardless of method. Most simply feel the numbness that comes from attempting to comprehend genocide on the scale the liberating armies are discovering throughout Germany and Poland. Heinrich's death is just one more event in the apocalyptic conclusion of histories most destructive war. His body is buried in an unmarked grave somewhere on the Lüneburg Heath in northern Germany. The British conduct the burial in secret, refusing to disclose the location then or later. Multiple sites are sometimes claimed, all of them unverified. The secrecy is deliberate, designed to prevent the grave from becoming a pilgrimage site for neo-Nazis or a target for desecration by victims' families. Heinrich Himmler, who spent his life obsessed with documentation and legacy, disappears into an anonymous burial that mirrors the mass graves he ordered for his victims. The man who kept meticulous records of everything is erased from the landscape without marker or memorial. But the records survive him, and they're devastating. As Allied forces occupy Germany, they discover mountains of documentation that Heinrich's bureaucratic obsessions produced. The files at Gestapo headquarters, the records from concentration camps, the reports from Einsatzgruppen operations, the correspondence between Heinrich and his subordinates planning genocide, the photographs documenting massacres, the architectural plans for gas chambers, the transport schedules for deportation trains. Everything is meticulously preserved because Heinrich believed documentation demonstrated efficiency and control. Now those same documents provide prosecutors with detailed evidence of systematic murder. The Nuremberg trials begin on November 20th, 1945, in the Bavarian city where Heinrich first heard Hitler speak in a beer hall 22 years earlier. 24 major Nazi leaders stand trial for crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Heinrich would have been defendant number 1 or 2 alongside Göring, but his suicide removes him from the dock. Instead, his presence haunts the proceedings through mountains of documentary evidence bearing his signature, his directives, his authorization for operations that killed millions. Prosecutors quote from his Posen speeches where he openly discussed exterminating Jews. They present Einsatzgruppen reports he received and filed. They show photographs of him visiting Auschwitz. He's convicted in absentia by the very paperwork he created. The testimony at Nuremberg reveals the full scope of what Heinrich built and commanded. Rudolf Haas, commandant of Auschwitz, testifies about Heinrich's visits to the camp, his orders to accelerate killings, his satisfaction with operational efficiency. Otto Ohlendorf, who commanded Einsatzgruppe, describes receiving orders to murder Jews throughout southern Ukraine and reports killing 90,000 people in roughly a year. Adolf Eichmann's subordinates explain the deportation system that transported millions to death camps on schedules Heinrich approved. The organizational charts presented at trial show Heinrich at the center of overlapping networks of terror, his authority extending through concentration camps, police forces, intelligence services, all coordinated to implement genocide. The world learns at Nuremberg what many suspected, but few fully grasped. The Holocaust wasn't spontaneous violence. It was planned, organized, administered through bureaucratic channels with the same procedures used for any government function. Heinrich's obsessive documentation proved it beyond doubt. The prosecutors don't need to rely on survivor testimony alone, though that testimony is powerful and heartbreaking. They have the perpetrator's own records, typed reports listing murder totals with bureaucratic precision, budget documents allocating funds for crematorium construction, correspondence discussing the most efficient methods for killing children. The banality is as shocking as the violence. Genocide conducted through memoranda and file folders. The concentration camps liberated by Allied forces provide physical evidence supporting the documentary record. Auschwitz, liberated by Soviets in January 1945, reveals gas chambers and crematoria even Heinrich's demolition orders couldn't completely erase. The Canadians, warehouses full of victims' belongings, contain 1.8 million sets of clothing, hundreds of thousands of pairs of shoes, 7 tons of human hair. Bergen-Belsen, liberated by the British in April, contains mass graves and thousands of corpses. Dachau, liberated by Americans, has the crematorium still containing bodies. The physical evidence corroborates the documents, making denial impossible. Survivor testimony adds human dimension to statistics that otherwise numb comprehension. They describe selections on Auschwitz platforms where Heinrich's system determined life or death with casual hand gestures. They testify about gas chambers, about watching families separated, about Sonderkommando prisoners forced to operate killing facilities, about death marches in the final months that killed tens of thousands who'd survived years of camps. Their testimony is difficult to hear, but it's necessary. The numbers: 6 million Jews murdered, 500,000 Roma, millions of Soviet prisoners of war, hundreds of thousands of others. These statistics represent individual humans with names and families and lives that Heinrich's machinery destroyed. The psychological assessments conducted on Nazi defendants at Nuremberg seek to understand how ordinary people became genocidal murderers. The conclusion is disturbing. Most aren't clinically insane. Their average intelligence, normal psychological profiles, indistinguishable from general population except for their willingness to follow orders and internalize ideology that justified murder. Heinrich, had he lived to be examined, would probably have shown similar results. Not a monster in the psychological sense, but an ordinary man who subordinated every moral instinct to ideological commitment and organizational loyalty. The research suggests that under certain conditions, ordinary people will commit extraordinary atrocities, a finding that remains deeply unsettling. The philosophical and moral questions raised by Heinrich's life and crimes resist easy answers. How does someone become capable of organizing genocide? What psychological mechanisms allow humans to murder on industrial scale while maintaining normal family relationships? Heinrich went home to his children after visiting Auschwitz. He wrote affectionate letters to his daughter while signing deportation orders. The compartmentalization is almost incomprehensible, yet the evidence is undeniable. He was simultaneously loving father and architect of Holocaust, bureaucrat concerned with administrative efficiency and mass murder responsible for millions of deaths. The ideology that motivated Heinrich, racial anti-Semitism claiming scientific validity, was not unique to him. Millions of Germans absorbed similar beliefs from Nazi propaganda, folkish movements, pseudo-scientific racism that permeated European culture. What distinguished Heinrich was his ability to translate ideology into systematic action, to build institutions that implemented what others merely believed. He discovered that bureaucracy provides distance from consequences, that following orders excuses individual responsibility, that documentation and euphemistic language disguise murder as administration. These mechanisms enabled genocide, and understanding them remains essential to preventing future atrocities. The legacy of Heinrich Himmler extends far beyond his death at age 44 in a British processing camp. He proved that systematic genocide is possible in modern bureaucratic states, that millions can be murdered through administrative processes, that ordinary people will participate in atrocities if ideology justifies it and authority commands it, that documentation meant to prove efficiency can later prove criminality. His life and crimes remain studied by historians, psychologists, political scientists, anyone seeking to understand how Holocaust happened and how to prevent similar atrocities in the future. The survivors of the camps he created carried trauma that lasts lifetimes and passes to subsequent generations. The Jewish communities he destroyed throughout Eastern Europe never recovered. The Roma people lost significant percentages of their population. The cultural destruction is incalculable. Entire traditions, languages, ways of life were systematically eliminated. The physical death toll, approximately 11 million people murdered in camps, Einsatzgruppen operations, ghettos, death marches, represents just part of the destruction. The cultural genocide, the erasure of communities that existed for centuries, the destruction of knowledge and tradition, this damage cannot be quantified numerically. The question that haunts history is how to prevent future Heinrich Himmlers. The mechanisms he employed, bureaucracy, documentation, ideological justification, hierarchical organization, these exist in every modern state. The capacity for genocide isn't unique to Nazi Germany. It requires only the combination of eliminationist ideology, authoritarian government willing to implement it, and population willing to participate or remain silent. Rwanda, Cambodia, Bosnia, other genocides since 1945 demonstrate that the Holocaust wasn't unique. The scale and industrial efficiency were unprecedented, but the fundamental crime, systematic murder of populations deemed undesirable, has occurred repeatedly. Heinrich's life demonstrates that evil doesn't require exceptional people. The failed chicken farmer with chronic stomach problems who vomited when witnessing executions became history's most efficient mass murderer, not through physical strength or personal courage, but through organizational ability and ideological commitment. He was mediocre in most respects, unremarkable in appearance, undistinguished in intellect. What he possessed was obsessive attention to detail, absolute loyalty to authority, and willingness to embrace racial hatred without restraint. These traits, combined with opportunity provided by Nazi seizure of power, allowed him to build machinery for industrial genocide. The documentation he left behind, the meticulous records of genocide, serves as warning to future generations. The Holocaust happened. It was systematic, organized, implemented through bureaucratic channels by thousands of perpetrators who mostly faced minimal consequences. Heinrich escaped trial through suicide, but the evidence he created testifies to his crimes. The photographs of victims, the transport schedules, the gas chamber blueprints, the reports listing murder totals, all of it survives, ensuring that denial is impossible and memory is preserved. Heinrich Himmler's corpse lies in an unmarked grave somewhere in northern Germany. His name is synonymous with Nazi terror. His crimes are documented beyond dispute. His legacy is genocide on scale that shocked human conscience and led to creation of international criminal law designed to prevent future atrocities. He achieved nothing he dreamed of. The 1,000-year Reich lasted 12 years. The Aryan Empire was defeated. The racial ideology he promoted is universally condemned. The SS organization he built was declared criminal. Everything he worked toward, every crime he committed, every life he destroyed, was for an ideology that history proved catastrophically wrong. The weak-bodied bureaucrat who organized the Holocaust remains one of history's greatest criminals, proof that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary evil when ideology overrides humanity and bureaucracy replaces moral judgment. His death at 44, from self-administered cyanide, prevented the trial he deserved, but couldn't prevent the judgment of history that will forever remember him as the architect of mechanized mass murder.